One day, two elderly ladies arrived at the orphanage. One was adorned with exquisite jewels and dressed in high-end fashion, the affluent Mrs. Cheen from the capital. The other, known as Mrs. Rwan, donned simple cotton and linen garments and resided in the countryside. Both of them took a liking to my sister and me, wishing to adopt one of us. To ensure fairness, the director suggested we draw lots to determine the outcome. My sister eagerly drew first, but ended up with Mrs. Rwan, leaving her quite discontented, though she accepted her fate. Under the meticulous guidance of Mrs. Cheen, I became proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, emerging as the most celebrated socialite in the capital, radiant and renowned. In stark contrast, my sister, who accompanied Mrs. Rwan, led a rather unfortunate life, achieving nothing, eloping with a young man, and, after becoming pregnant, being abandoned in dire circumstances. She sought me out, gazing upon me adorned with an extravagant diamond necklace and clad in a haute couture gown, a vision of a princess, and envy consumed her, leading her to stab me fatally. Upon opening my eyes once more, we were both reborn on the day the two ladies came to select a child. My sister again seized the first opportunity to draw lots, but this time she picked a different slip. With a triumphant expression, she declared, "Sister, this time I shall become a celebrated socialite in the capital, while you can languish in the countryside with that stern and austere old woman." I smiled and offered my blessings. As I opened my eyes, sunlight streamed through the window of the orphanage infirmary, casting mottled shadows upon the white sheets. "Nanji, you are awake?" The voice of Director Lin Jingxi came from the doorway. "The two ladies have arrived and are waiting in the reception room." I bolted upright, my heart nearly leaping from my chest. This scene felt all too familiar. It was precisely 15 years ago when Mrs. Cheen and Mrs. Rwan came to the orphanage to select their adopted daughters. "Where is Beiji?" My voice trembled slightly. "She has already gone to the reception room," Director Lin sighed. "That child is always so impatient." I lowered my gaze to my slender arms. This was no dream. I had truly been reborn, returning to the day that would alter my destiny. In the reception room, Beiji stood obediently before the two ladies. She was dressed in the finest dress from the orphanage, her hair meticulously styled, and her face adorned with an intentionally sweet smile. "Sister?" She turned to see me, her eyes lighting up. "Come quickly, the two ladies are going to choose one of us." I approached slowly, each step feeling as though I were treading upon the fragile ice of memory. To my left sat Mrs. Cheen, elegantly attired in a Chanel ensemble, her diamond earrings glimmering in the sunlight. To my right was Mrs. Rwan, clad in a simple cotton linen tunic, her wrist adorned with a string of ancient sandalwood beads. "So, these are the twins from the Rwan family?" Mrs. Cheen scrutinized us with a discerning gaze, remarking, "They are certainly quite pretty." Mrs. Rwan remained silent, her gentle eyes lingering on my face for a few extra seconds. In the interest of fairness, Director Lin produced an exquisite wooden box. Inside are two slips of paper. "Each of you will draw one. The one who draws the red slip will accompany Mrs. Cheen, and the one who draws the blue slip will accompany Mrs. Rwan." Beiji immediately stepped forward, exclaiming, "I'll go first." Her actions mirrored those of our previous life, yet this time she drew a red slip. I drew Mrs. Cheen. Beiji exclaimed joyfully. Realizing her indiscretion, she hastily reined in her expression, yet the pride in her eyes was impossible to conceal. She turned to me and whispered, "Sister, this time I shall become a socialite in the capital. You can languish in the countryside under the thumb of that rigid and exacting old woman." I accepted the remaining blue card with a faint smile. "I wish you all your heart's desires." Beiji was momentarily taken aback, clearly unprepared for my tranquil demeanor. Little did she know that at this moment, I was engulfed by an unprecedented sense of liberation. Mrs. Cheen rose gracefully, smoothing her skirt. "Then it is settled, Beiji. Go gather your belongings. We shall return to the capital this afternoon." Beiji joyfully dashed out of the reception room, not even casting a glance at Mrs. Rwan. The room was left with only Mrs. Rwan, Director Lin, and myself. Suddenly, Mrs. Rwan spoke. "Nanji, you seem rather unperturbed?" I lifted my gaze to meet hers directly. "Madam, it is my honor to live alongside you." A flicker of surprise crossed Mrs. Rwan's eyes, followed by a smile. "Good child, we shall depart tomorrow. I have a quaint little courtyard in Suzhou that you will undoubtedly adore." Upon returning to the dormitory, Beiji was exuberantly packing her pitifully scant belongings. "Sister, you do not comprehend what you have lost." Without lifting her head, she declared, "Mrs. Cheen is a renowned matron in the capital. By following her, I shall surely marry into a prestigious family." I sat on the edge of the bed, observing her busy silhouette. "Beiji, Remember to take care of yourself. Stop pretending. She suddenly turned, her eyes shimmering with an inscrutable light. You are clearly consumed by jealousy. Why feign generosity? I chose not to argue. In my past life, I indeed harbored jealousy, even resentment towards the unfairness of fate. For I alone understood how excruciating it was to follow Mrs. Jean. By the way, Beiji rummaged beneath her pillow and tossed me a tattered fairy tale book. You can keep this. I have no need for it anymore. It was the only possession left to us by our parents. I took the book, my throat tightening. Thank you. At 3 in the afternoon, a black Rolls-Royce halted at the orphanage's entrance. Beiji could hardly contain her excitement as she climbed into the car, not even glancing back at the place we had called home for a decade. Before departing, Mrs. Jean cast me a meaningful glance. Nanji, sometimes a seemingly poor choice is, in fact, a stroke of fortune. I was taken aback. She had never spoken such words to me in my previous life. The following morning, Mrs. Ron arrived to collect me in an old-fashioned jeep. In stark contrast to Mrs. Jean's grand spectacle, her departure was utterly discreet. Get in the car, child. Mrs. Ron assisted me with my luggage. We have a long journey ahead. As the vehicle left the orphanage, traversing through the city and heading towards the outskirts, the scenery outside gradually transformed from steel and concrete to lush, verdant fields. Madam, I could not help but inquire, do you truly reside in the countryside? Mrs. Ron chuckled lightly. What? Do you disdain the countryside? No, imarali. I hesitated, carefully choosing my words. I find you unlike the typical country dweller. I indeed do not live in the true countryside, Mrs. Ron replied, maneuvering the steering wheel as we turned onto a tree-lined path. I have a garden in Suzhou where I usually reside alone, occasionally teaching a few students. 2 hours later, the car entered a serene mountain road. After navigating several bends, the view suddenly opened up, a classical garden with white walls and black tiles nestled halfway up the hill, surrounded by bamboo groves, resembling a hidden paradise. Is this your home? I gasped, leaning against the car window in astonishment. Mrs. Ron halted the vehicle. Yes, it is a small courtyard passed down through my family, named Tinwu Biyuan. This was far from a small courtyard. It was evidently a classical garden occupying at least 5 acres. I could hardly fathom how Beiji had described this place as a rundown farmhouse in my past life. Mrs. Ron guided me through the winding corridor, where each corner revealed a new marvel. The sound of flowing water and the sight of pavilions and towers exuded an air of timeless elegance. From now on, you shall reside in this room. Mrs. Ron opened a beautifully carved wooden door, revealing a spacious bedroom with a view of a lotus pond outside the window. Do you like it? My eyes welled with tears. It is exquisite. Is this truly my room? Of course, Mrs. Ron patted my shoulder. Take a rest. I shall call you for dinner. By the way. She paused at the door, turning back. Are you skilled with needlework? I can manage some basic mending, I replied honestly. Mrs. Ron nodded, saying no more on the matter. I settled on the couch by the window, gently caressing the smooth wooden sill. In my previous life, Beiji had never mentioned these details while living with Mrs. Ron. She always complained about Mrs. Ruan's strictness and the hardships of life. Yet now, what I behold is an unimaginable tranquility and beauty. Dinner is served in a small hall by the water, featuring simple yet exquisite dishes, steamed bass, longjing shrimp, a seasonal vegetable, and a mushroom soup. Go on, eat. Everything is homegrown. Madame Wan kindly ladles a bowl of soup for me. I cautiously take a sip, and the delightful flavor instantly blossoms on my palate. It's utterly delicious. Madame Wan smiled. I'm glad you like it. Nanji, do you know why I chose to adopt you? I shook my head. It is because of your eyes. Madame Wan set down her chopsticks. The way you look at the embroidery samples is exactly how I did in my youth. I was taken aback. Embroidery? I am a bearer of the national intangible cultural heritage, Jing embroidery. Her voice was calm, yet it sent a tremor through my heart. For years, I have been searching for a suitable heir. Jing embroidery. In my previous life, I had encountered a piece of Jing embroidery at an auction. Its exquisite patterns and delicate stitches lingered in my memory. And Madame Wan is the heir? You want to teach me Jing embroidery? My voice trembled. If you are willing to learn, Madame Wan gazed at me. It requires immense patience and perseverance. Mastery is not achieved overnight. I set down my bowl and chopsticks, standing solemnly to bow deeply to Madame Wan. Please teach me. I will certainly strive to learn. Madame Wan helped me up, her eyes glimmering with pride. Good child, let us begin tomorrow. That night, I lay amidst the soft bedding, listening to the chirping of insects outside, my heart brimming with an unprecedented sense of tranquility and anticipation. Simultaneously, I couldn't help but think of Bei Ji. At this moment, she must have already arrived at the Qin residence, brimming with excitement for the high society life about to commence, unaware that the good fortune she perceives is, in fact, the beginning of my nightmare from the previous life. As the morning sun streamed through the intricately carved window lattice, I was abruptly roused from my slumber, a cold sweat trickling down my back. Once again, I found myself reliving that fateful day in my past life when Lady Qin, with a frosty demeanor, ordered the physician to extract 2 of my ribs. Nanji? A gentle knock echoed from outside the door. Are you awake? I hastily wiped my face and replied, Yes, Lady Yuan. Freshen up and join me in the embroidery room. The footsteps gradually faded away. Taking a deep breath, I compelled myself to detach from the harrowing memories. I pushed open the window, allowing the crisp mountain air to envelop me, infused with the refreshing fragrance of bamboo leaves. This is Rebirth, I reassured myself. The embroidery room was situated on the eastern side of the garden, a quaint little cottage surrounded by water on 3 sides. Upon entering, I found Lady Yuan seated by the window, poised before her embroidery frame, the sunlight casting a golden aura around her. Come, she beckoned. Before her lay a stretch of pristine white satin, upon which a faint ink outline of a lotus blossom had been sketched. Nearby, a needlework box shimmered in the sunlight, its colorful threads glistening with a delicate sheen. The art of Jing embroidery hinges upon 4 cardinal principles: evenness, precision, delicacy, and density. Lady Yuan picked up an embroidery needle. Today we shall begin with the most fundamental technique, the straight stitch. Her fingers danced gracefully, the needle and thread weaving seamlessly through the satin, her movements as fluid as water. I held my breath, captivated, as the slender needle appeared to possess a life of its own. Give it a try. She extended the needle towards me. Taking the needle, my hands trembled slightly. In my previous life, I had experienced a similar anxiety, albeit in front of the piano at the Qin residence, where a single wrong note would earn me the ruler's wrath. As I made my first stitch, the thread knotted. Mortified, I glanced up, only to meet Lady Yuan's encouraging gaze. There's no rush, take your time. With patience, she guided me on how to untangle the knot, explaining embroidery, much like life, becomes chaotic when the heart is troubled. The entire morning was spent in repetitive practice of the simplest straight stitch. As noon approached, Lady Yuan abruptly set aside her work. Let me show you something. She retrieved a brocade box from the sandalwood cabinet. The moment she lifted the lid, I gasped, momentarily breathless. Inside was a partially completed piece titled "100 Birds Adoring the Phoenix." The phoenix, embroidered with golden thread, appeared so lifelike that each feather sparkled with a myriad of tiny lights, as if it might soar from the satin at any moment. This is, I stammered, my work from 30 years. Lady Yuan gently caressed the wings of the phoenix. The most challenging aspect of Jing embroidery is the gold thread technique, which involves outlining with gold thread and filling in with colored threads. I gazed in rapture at the phoenix, suddenly recalling a breathtaking piece of Jing embroidery I had glimpsed at an auction in my past life. I had been utterly captivated by its stunning beauty, unaware that it was the craftsmanship of Lady Yuan. Do you like it? She inquired. I nodded vigorously, my throat constricted. Study diligently, and one day you too shall create such masterpieces. She closed the brocade box. Now let us have lunch. The midday meal consisted of light southern Jiangnan dishes, yet I found it exceptionally delightful. Afterward, Lady Yuan permitted me an hour of rest. Returning to my room, sleep eluded me, my mind consumed with thoughts of the golden phoenix. I retrieved a fairy tale book from beneath my pillow, casually flipping through its pages. A yellowed photograph slipped out, revealing the only family portrait we possessed. My parents appeared youthful, while my sister, Bei Ji, and I were mere infants in swaddling. My fingertips brushed against my mother's face, and I suddenly noticed a delicate brooch pinned to her collar, intricately embroidered. It was a detail I had overlooked in my past life. Nanji? Lady Yuan's voice called from outside the door. Have you rested well? I hastily tucked the photograph back into the book. Yes. The afternoon practice went more smoothly than the morning. By sunset, I had managed to stitch a line that could be considered reasonably straight. Lady Yuan examined my work, her eyes glimmering with an emotion I could not decipher. You possess great talent, she finally remarked. Tomorrow, we shall learn the return stitch. After dinner, Lady Yuan took me for a stroll in the garden. The nighttime ambience was enchanting, with the palace lanterns casting a warm glow. Why did you choose to adopt a child? I mustered the courage to ask. Without pausing her steps, she replied, Jing embroidery needs to be passed down. In my youth, I took on several apprentices, but they either could not endure hardship or lacked sincerity. She paused briefly. You're different. How do you know? The look in your eyes. Lady Yuan halted, the moonlight bathing her silver hair. When you gaze at the embroidery, it's as if you are seeing a long-lost relative. A jolt ran through me, leaving me at a loss for words. In the stillness of night, I dreamt once more of my past life. Lady Qin's icy voice echoed in my ears. If your waist were an inch thinner, the young master of the Liu family would fancy you. Then came the excruciating pain as 2 ribs were forcibly extracted. Nanji? Nanji. I jolted awake, finding Lady Yuan sitting at my bedside, a damp cloth in hand. Did you have a nightmare? She gently wiped the cold sweat from my forehead. I nodded, unable to articulate the contents of my dream. Drink some water. She offered me a cup of warm water. It's only natural for your first night away from home. I sipped slowly. The warmth eased my taut nerves. Lady Yuan carried a faint scent of sandalwood, instilling an inexplicable sense of comfort. Go to sleep. We have practice tomorrow. She tucked in the corners of my blanket before quietly leaving. I gazed at the canopy above, my thoughts drifting far away. What was Beiji doing at this moment? Was she also restless, or was she eagerly anticipating the glamorous life that awaited her? As this thought crossed my mind, I retrieved the fairy tale book from beneath my pillow, using the moonlight to examine the family portrait. The embroidered brooch on my mother's chest was but a mere blur in the photograph, yet it inexplicably tugged at my heartstrings. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, in the Qin residence of the capital, Beiji curled up on the opulent 4-poster bed, her tears soaking the silk pillowcase. Earlier that day, Lady Qin had taken her for a full-body examination, during which the doctor remarked that her pelvis was too wide and that she needed to commence special training immediately. From tomorrow on, you will rise at 6 o'clock and begin 2 hours of physical training. Lady Qin had left her with these words. I paid a hefty sum to adopt you. Do not let me down. Clenching the corner of her blanket, Beiji recalled her sister's tranquil acceptance of the blue card. Did Nanji already know it would come to this? No, that cannot be. She reassured herself. This is merely a test one must endure to become a socialite. Once she became the most renowned socialite in the capital, everything would be worth it. Moonlight streamed through the sheer curtains, casting mottled shadows on the floor. Beiji wiped her tears and forced herself to sleep. Tomorrow, her new life would truly commence. Meanwhile, in the Tingwu Bun, I had already slipped back into slumber. This time, my dreams were devoid of cold operating tables. Instead, I beheld a phoenix embroidered with golden thread, shimmering brilliantly in the sunlight. As dawn broke, I found myself seated before the embroidery frame. Over the past 3 months, I had cultivated the habit of rising before dawn to practice. Lady Yuan had remarked on my talent, yet I understood that talent must be nurtured with diligence. The needle pierced through the satin, producing a subtle rustling sound. The techniques of the return stitch, needle set, and rolling stitch had become second nature to me. Today, Lady Yuan announced that she would teach me the gold thread technique, the most challenging skill in Jing embroidery. Up so early? Lady Yuan's voice came from behind me. She approached with 2 bowls of steaming osmanthus rice balls. Have something to eat first. I set down my needle and accepted the porcelain bowl. The sweet, fragrant rice wine glided down my throat, warmth radiating from my stomach throughout my body. The gold thread is made from a special gold foil. Lady Yuan retrieved a roll of shimmering gold thread from the brocade box. This thread, crafted from real gold hammered into foil, then wrapped in silk, was thinner than a strand of hair. I held my breath, watching the roll of gold thread. In the morning light, it resembled flowing liquid sunlight. Watch closely. Lady Yuan deftly picked up a strand of gold thread and threaded it through a specially designed fine needle. Her fingers danced upon the embroidery frame, the gold thread tracing elegant vine patterns on the pristine satin, each stitch executed with precision as if measured. I attempted to replicate her movements, but the gold thread was far more delicate than ordinary silk thread, tangling or breaking at the slightest misstep. One morning, I squandered several lengths of golden thread, beads of perspiration forming on my forehead. There was no need to rush. Madame Yuan steadied my trembling hand, reminding me that the golden thread possessed a spirit of its own, and I must cater to its temperament. In the afternoon, I found myself alone in the embroidery room, continuing my practice. Time slipped away unbeknownst to me, until I suddenly felt the sensation of the needle gliding effortlessly through the silk, leaving behind a flawless curve. Excellent. Madame Wan had somehow appeared at my side, her voice laced with delight, exclaiming, just like that. I looked up, only to realize that the sun had set beyond the window. I had been engrossed in practice for an entire day, forgetting even to eat lunch. Clearly, I was destined for this craft. Madame Wan gently caressed the vine pattern I had just completed, sharing that it had taken her 3 months to grasp the art of gold thread, while I had merely touched upon its essence in a single day. The glimmer in her eyes warmed my heart. In my past life at the Qin residence, no matter how hard I tried, it was never sufficient. Dinner was particularly sumptuous, with Madame Wan having the cook prepare my favorite sweet and sour mandarin fish. Eat slowly, she cautioned, as she placed a piece of fish belly in my bowl. Tomorrow, I will take you somewhere special. Where to? I inquired, biting my chopsticks. To the Suzhou Embroidery Museum, Madame Wan smiled, to witness true masterpieces. That night, I dreamt of standing in a resplendent palace, its walls adorned with exquisite Jing embroidery. Suddenly, a phoenix, embroidered in golden thread, soared from the artwork, circling around me thrice before alighting on my shoulder, gently pecking at my earlobe. When I awoke, the world outside was still cloaked in darkness. A fairy tale book lay forgotten on the floor, a family photo slipping out. I picked up the picture and, illuminated by moonlight, studied my mother's gentle features, discovering a striking resemblance to Madame Wan. The thought made my heart skip a beat.
How could this be?
I shook my head, stuffing the photo back into the book, convincing myself it was merely a product of my thoughts manifesting in dreams. Meanwhile, in the capital's Qin residence, Beiji huddled in the corner of the bathroom, biting down on a towel to muffle her cries. Today, the doctor had removed 2 of her ribs. Despite the anesthesia, the pain was sharp and relentless. Just endure it, came the cold voice of Madame Qin from beyond the door. The Liu family prefers girls with slender waists. Beiji wiped her tears, lifting her nightgown before the mirror. Bandages wrapped around her delicate waist, which now seemed even more diminutive. The reflection revealed a girl pale as a ghost, her lips unnaturally crimson from biting them too hard. It is worth it, she murmured to her reflection. To ascend to the upper echelons of society, sacrifices must be made. She recalled the fairy tale of the Little Mermaid, who traded her voice for legs. Was she not doing the same? Exchanging her ribs for a chance to infiltrate high society. Returning to her bedroom, Beiji retrieved a fashion magazine from beneath her pillow. The cover showcased a socialite clad in haute couture, a diamond necklace glistening at her neck. She had secretly taken it from Madame Qin's study, perusing it nightly as motivation to persevere. One day, I will shine brighter than you, she vowed to the cover girl, before curling into a ball in pain. The following morning, Madame Wan took me to the Suzhou Embroidery Museum. The collection of exquisite embroideries from various dynasties left me awestruck, especially the museum's prized possession, a complete scroll of Along the River during the Qingming Festival, crafted by a Qing dynasty embroideress over a decade. Look at the stitches here. Madame Wan pointed to the eaves of a building in the painting. This seed stitch technique is rarely practiced nowadays. I leaned closer to the glass display, wishing to imprint every stitch and thread into my memory. The jewelry exhibitions and fashion shows I had attended in my past life, as Qin's adopted daughter, seemed utterly mundane compared to these timeless embroideries.
Teacher Wan.
A middle-aged lady in a qipao approached briskly. Why didn't you inform me of your arrival in advance? I brought my apprentice to see, Madame Wan replied, patting my shoulder. This is Director Liang of the museum. Director Liang warmly grasped my hand, saying, to have caught Teacher Ruan's eye, this young lady must possess exceptional talent. I smiled bashfully, unsure how to respond. In my past life, I had learned countless social niceties as a daughter of the Qin family, yet those insincere pleasantries felt so pale in the face of genuine sincerity. On the journey back, I could not help but ask, Madame Wan, why did you choose to live in seclusion at Tingwu Biyuan? With your skills, you would surely receive greater acclaim in the capital. Madame Wan paused for a moment, the shadows of trees outside casting dappled patterns across her face. In my youth, I too was captivated by fame and fortune. She finally spoke, until I realized that what people admired was not my embroidery, but rather the title of heir to the Wan family's Jing embroidery. She shook her head. True art requires tranquility, much like bamboo, which grows only 3 centimeters in 4 years, yet in the 5th year can surge forth at a rate of 30 centimeters per day. I nodded, somewhat understanding, but vaguely grasped her reason for seeking solace away from the clamor. After dinner, I returned to the embroidery room to continue practicing gold thread. Suddenly, a sharp pain erupted at my temples. Memories from my past life flooding back like a tidal wave, the excruciating abdominal pain after Madame Chin forced me to swallow diet pills, the nauseating dizziness from being overindulged with alcohol at banquets, and the icy chill when Beiji's knife pierced my chest. Nanji, Madame Wan burst in, finding me curled on the floor, trembling, golden threads scattered around me. She enveloped me in her arms, gently rocking me like a mother soothing a frightened child. I caught a whiff of sandalwood and a hint of herbal bitterness from her clothing. It's all right, she comforted. It's all over now. I clung tightly to her garment, my tears soaking the fabric at her chest. In that moment, I was not the heir to Jing embroidery, but merely a little girl yearning for maternal love. Madame Ruan helped me back to my room, bringing a bowl of calming herbal soup. Drink this and have a good night's sleep, she instructed, tucking the blankets around me. Tomorrow, take a break from practice. I shook my head. I want to continue practicing. Madame Ruan sighed, gently smoothing my damp hair from my forehead. Sometimes, I forget that you are only 15. She paused. Nanji, art is not about relentless toil. You must first learn to be kind to yourself. After she left, I gazed at the embroidered canopy above. In my past life, I had never been allowed to be kind to myself. Madame Chin deemed that a sign of weakness. Yet Madame Wan imparted to me that suffering was not a requisite for art. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting small squares of light upon the floor. I retrieved the fairy tale book from beneath my pillow, the image of my mother smiling gently in the family portrait. I suddenly wondered if my mother were still alive. Would she support my pursuit of Jing embroidery? Hundreds of miles away in the capital, Beiji practiced her smile before the mirror. Madame Chin instructed. A perfect smile must reveal 8 teeth, the corners of the mouth slightly curved downwards, without any wrinkles. The Liu family is hosting a banquet next month. Madame Chin stated coldly from the doorway. You have only 3 weeks to perfect your demeanor. Beiji continued to adjust the curve of her lips in the mirror, until her cheek muscles ached. The girl in the reflection resembled a porcelain doll, beautiful yet hollow. I will succeed, she whispered to herself, so softly that only she could hear. I will surpass Nanji. Outside, a cold moon hung high, casting its light upon Tingwu Bun in Suzhou. I fell asleep clutching the satin embroidered with the vine pattern, and in my dreams, the golden phoenix returned, this time bringing a length of golden thread. Gently placing it in my palm. Nanji, take this for framing, Madame Wan instructed, handing me a recently completed embroidery. Next month, we will submit this piece to the Suzhou Arts and Crafts exhibition. I carefully accepted the artwork, which depicted a butterfly resting on a peony, its wings embroidered with gold thread, shimmering under the sunlight. This was my month-long endeavor, Butterfly Love Flower, which Madame Wan declared had reached an apprentice level of skill. Can I truly exhibit this? My voice trembled as my fingers lightly traced the butterfly's wings. Madame Wan smiled and nodded. Of course, this is your creation. The framing shop on Pingjiang Road is a time-honored establishment with a history spanning a century. As I pushed open the intricately carved wooden door, the wind chimes emitted a crisp sound. The proprietor, an elderly gentleman with a head of silver hair, was donning reading glasses as he meticulously repaired an ancient painting. Are you the apprentice of Master Wan? He inquired, raising his gaze to appraise me. I nodded respectfully and presented my embroidery. Could you please frame this for me? The old man unfolded the piece, and his eyes widened behind his spectacles. Did you embroider this golden butterfly? Indeed, I replied, nervously twisting the hem of my garment. He picked up a magnifying glass and scrutinized each stitch, taking a moment before he set it down. The younger generation is formidable. The gold thread technique, here, reminds me of Master Wan's 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix from 20 years ago. He turned and retrieved a redwood box from the back room. This is what you should use for framing. It befits such an exquisite piece. On my way back, I detoured to the post office. Beiji had sent me a letter last week, filled with her ostentatious boasts about how many jewels and luxurious garments Madame Chin had purchased for her and the elite soirees she had attended. Enclosed was a photograph of Beiji in a Chanel ensemble, smiling beside a sports car. I purchased a postcard featuring the scenery of Tingwu Bun and penned a brief reply. My embroidery butterfly love flower will be exhibited soon. Madame Wan gifted me a box of precious gold thread, more delightful than diamonds. Best wishes, Nanji. As I sealed the envelope, I felt the box of gold thread in my pocket. This was a reward from Madame Wan yesterday, said to be a special supply from the Palace Museum's restoration department. Utterly unattainable on the market. Compared to the cold, hard diamonds in Beiji's photograph, This box of gold thread was the true treasure in my heart. Upon returning to Tingwu Bun, I found the embroidery room empty. A note on the table read, "Gone to give a lecture at Suzhou University. Back before dinner." There are some old embroidery pieces in the West Chamber. You may take them for study. The West Chamber was where Madame Wan stored her precious materials, and she usually forbade me from entering. I gently pushed the door open, sunlight streaming through the window, casting mottled shadows on the blue brick floor. Inside the redwood cabinet against the wall, various silk threads, satin, and framed embroidery pieces were neatly arranged. I opened the bottom drawer, revealing a stack of yellowed embroidery pieces. The topmost piece depicted a pair of lotus flowers, its stitching archaic yet vivid, evidently aged. As I turned to the second piece, my hand froze. On the back, written in brushstrokes, were the words, "To my beloved daughter Qinggu, winter of the Gengzi year." Qinggu? Madame Ruan's maiden name? I carefully examined the other embroidery pieces, and each bore similar inscriptions on the back. The smallest piece at the bottom was the most exquisite, depicting a phoenix poised to take flight. Flipping it over, I found the inscription, "A keepsake for Qingwu's first birthday, from Mother." Attached to the edge of the embroidery was a tiny brooch, featuring the very phoenix design. My breath caught. This brooch was nearly identical to the one my mother wore in her photograph. "Have you found something?" Madame Ruan's voice suddenly came from behind me. I jolted, and the embroidery slipped from my hands, falling to the floor. She bent down to retrieve it, her gaze lingering on the brooch for a moment, her expression inscrutable. "These are the works of my mother," she said softly, caressing the phoenix on the embroidery. She was among the last court embroiderers of the late Qing dynasty. I summoned my courage to ask, "This brooch?" "It was a gift from my mother on my first birthday." Madame Wan placed the brooch back in its place. Unfortunately, it was lost later. She was clearly evading something. I opened my mouth but ultimately refrained from presenting my mother's photograph. Some mysteries may require the right moment to unravel. During dinner, Madame Wan was unusually silent. It was not until the tea time after the meal that she suddenly spoke. "Nanji, do you know why the eyes of the phoenix in Jing embroidery are made of black pearls?" I shook my head. "Because the phoenix is a divine bird that rises from the ashes." Madame Wan gazed into the distance. "The black pearl symbolizes its wisdom in seeing through the cycle of life and death." Her words reminded me of the day of rebirth. The sharp pain of Beiji's knife, followed by an endless darkness until I opened my eyes once more at the crossroads of fate. "Madame Ruan," I hesitated to ask, "do you believe people can have a second chance?" "Absolutely," she said, her gaze meaningful, much like the phoenix's rebirth. Later that night, I once again took out my mother's photograph and the fairy tale book. Bathed in moonlight, I meticulously compared the brooch in the photograph with the one I had seen today. Aside from the wear of time, the phoenix designs were nearly identical in their outstretched poses and the curvature of their tail feathers. A daring conjecture began to form in my mind. Could my mother and Madame Wan be related? But if that were the case, why were my sister and I sent to the orphanage? Why didn't Madame Wan recognize me when we first met? As these questions swirled in my thoughts, I succumbed to slumber. In my dreams, a golden phoenix clutched the brooch in its beak, circling above my head 3 times before soaring into the distance. Meanwhile, in the Liu family villa in the capital, Beiji stood before a dressing mirror, a maid straining to tighten her gown's corset. The freshly stitched wound was being compressed, causing her vision to blur. "Tighter," she insisted. Madame Qin observes coldly, "Young Master Liu prefers girls with slender waists."
Baiji grit her teeth, forcing a smile.
Tonight was young Master Liu's birthday banquet, a gathering of the city's elite. This was her first formal appearance as a foster daughter of the Qin family, and she could not afford to make a blunder. At last, the corset was secured, cinching her waist to less than 16 inches. She attempted a deep breath, but could only inhale a thin gasp of air. "Perfect," Madame Qin appraised her. "Remember, your task tonight is to capture young Master Liu's attention." As the luxurious car pulled into the Liu family villa, Beiji discreetly swallowed 2 painkillers. The banquet hall was resplendent, crystal chandeliers refracting dazzling light. Among the throngs of elegantly dressed attendees, she spotted the fabled young Master Liu, heir to the Liu group, clad in a bespoke suit, exuding an air of affluence with every gesture. "That is your target," Madame Qin whispered in her ear. "Go. Dance with him." Beiji raised her champagne flute, suppressing the agonizing pain in her waist, and approached Lu Qinzhou with the perfect smile she had practiced countless times. As the music began, he indeed invited her to dance. Beiji's movements were graceful and fluid, and no one noticed the blood seeping from the wound beneath her corset. Miss Qin dances exceptionally well, Lu Qinzhou remarked, his voice deep and melodious. Just call me Beiji, she replied, tilting her head slightly to reveal her swan-like neck. As one dance concluded, more affluent young men surrounded her. Beiji became the center of attention, their eyes lingering on her delicate waist and exquisite collarbone. Madame Qin stood at a distance, wearing a satisfied smile. The banquet continued until the early hours. Back at the Qin residence, Beiji collapsed onto her bed. Once the corset was released, the pristine bandages were already soaked in blood. The maid hurriedly changed her dressings, yet Beiji smiled. Tonight. Lu Qinzhou asked for my contact information and invited me to the art exhibition next week. It was worth it, she murmured to her reflection in the mirror. Her face pale. As the effects of the painkillers began to wane, the pain surged like a tide. Curling up in bed, Beiji suddenly recalled Nanji's postcard. What is so special about that box of gold thread? She casually grabbed a diamond bracelet from her dressing table, gifted by a wealthy businessman that evening, worth enough to purchase a warehouse full of gold thread. Once I become Mrs. Liu. Beiji fantasized about her future through the haze of pain, slowly succumbing to the drug-induced slumber. A week later, the Suzhou Arts and Crafts exhibition opened. My butterfly love flower was prominently displayed in the embroidery section, attracting many onlookers. Madame Ruan, clad in a formal qipao, introduced my work to various guests. Is this the little girl who embroidered the golden butterfly? An elderly gentleman with silver hair approached, his judge's badge gleaming on his chest. Oldly, Madame Ruan exclaimed, bowing in surprise, I didn't expect you to come in person. I heard there's a genius young lady. How could I not come? Oldly leaned closer to the glass display case, carefully examining my embroidery. Excellent. The gold thread technique is exquisite, and the butterfly is lifelike, truly spirited. I stood beside him, my cheeks aflame. Li Lao is a nationally recognized master of arts and crafts, and to receive his commendation is something I could scarcely have dreamed of. Little girl, would you care to learn Su embroidery from me? Li Lao suddenly inquired. I was taken aback, instinctively glancing at Madame Ruan. A fleeting, inscrutable emotion passed across her face. Thank you for your kindness, Li Lao, I replied with a deep bow, but I am already studying Jing embroidery under Madame Ruan. Li Lao erupted into hearty laughter. Excellent. Respect for one's teacher is commendable. He patted Madame Ruan on the shoulder. Qinggu, you've taken on a fine disciple. After the exhibition concluded, Madame Ruan and I strolled leisurely along Pingjiang Road back to Tingwu Biyuan. The old city of Suzhou, bathed in the tranquility of night, appeared serene and beautiful. The cobblestone paths shimmered under the moonlight, resembling a layer of silver frost. Why did you decline Li Lao's offer? Madame Ruan suddenly asked. His proficiency in Su embroidery certainly surpasses mine. I halted, gazing at the flickering reflections upon the river surface, because Jing embroidery reminds me of my mother. Madame Ruan paused. Your mother? The brooch she wore in her photograph is almost identical to the one you possess. I summoned the courage to voice my question. Madame Ruan, do you know my mother? The willow branches by the riverside swayed gently in the evening breeze, and Madame Ruan's profile appeared exceptionally soft yet laden with sorrow under the moonlight. We shall discuss this at home, she said softly, turning to continue her way. I followed closely behind her, my heart racing. Perhaps tonight, I would finally unravel the mystery of my lineage that had haunted me for years. In the study of Tingwu Biyuan, the scent of sandalwood wafted through the air. Madame Ruan retrieved the phoenix brooch from a rosewood box and placed it beneath the lamp. The phoenix, embroidered in golden threads, came alive in the light, an exact replica of the one in my mother's photograph. Your mother was Ruan Qingji. Madame Ruan's voice trembled slightly. She was my biological sister. My teacup nearly slipped from my grasp, the scalding tea splattering across my hand, though I felt nothing. 30 years ago, Qingji fell in love with a young painter, also surnamed Ruan. Madame Ruan caressed the intricate patterns on the brooch. Our father disapproved, claiming that artists live in poverty. Yet Qingji was determined to elope with him. Outside, the shadows of bamboo danced in the night breeze, casting shapes on the wall akin to my tumultuous thoughts. And then, I inquired hoarsely. 10 years later, I received a letter from my sister, stating that she was gravely ill and hoped I could look after her daughters. Tears welled in Madame Ruan's eyes. When I arrived, I found only you children and this brooch. Trembling, I pulled out a family photograph from my pocket. Are these my parents? Madame Ruan took the photo. Her fingers gently brushing over my mother's face. Jingji left this brooch for you, hoping that one day you would return to your roots. Countless fragments of familiarity flooded my mind upon first encountering Jing embroidery, the ease with which I learned the gold thread technique. And that golden phoenix in my dreams, all now found their explanations. So, you went to the orphanage to find us? Madame Ruan nodded. I searched for 5 years. The moment I laid eyes on you, I recognized you as the spitting image of Qingji in her youth. She opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowed embroidery manual. This belonged to your mother. Her talent surpassed mine, and she created many new stitches. As I flipped through the manual, the familiar handwriting brought a lump to my throat. Next to the delicate characters were charming sketches clearly drawn for children. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I wanted you to grow strong enough. Madame Ruan sighed softly. Carrying too much of the past will hinder your ability to wield a needle. That night, I fell asleep clutching my mother's embroidery manual, instead of the golden phoenix. I dreamt of a gentle woman with a blurred visage, sitting before an embroidery frame, humming a nursery rhyme as she threaded a needle. The following morning, I rose earlier than usual. In the embroidery room, I opened my mother's manual and found a page detailing the Nirvana stitch, a technique she had pioneered. Layering gold threads of varying thicknesses to create a three-dimensional effect. I attempted to replicate the technique, but no matter how hard I tried, I could not achieve the described effect. Just then, Madame Ruan approached quietly. The Nirvana stitch requires a special threading method, she said, demonstrating with needle and thread. Qingji was accustomed to threading from the bottom up, the opposite of what most do. As I emulated my mother's technique, I finally found my rhythm. The gold thread flowed upon the satin, gradually forming the outline of a feather. She has always been teaching you, Madame Ruan murmured, through bloodline, through dreams. I looked up to find tears glistening in her eyes. In that moment, I was no longer just her disciple, but a cherished family member bound by blood. Simultaneously, in the most exclusive private club in the capital, Beiji walked arm in arm with Lu Qinzhou into the banquet hall. This was her 7th high-profile gala since becoming a foster daughter of the Qin family, and she had become adept at navigating various social situations. Young Master Lu, may I ask who this is? A middle-aged businessman scrutinized Beiji. This is Ruan Beiji, the foster daughter of the Qin family, Lu Qinzhou replied casually, as if introducing a newly acquired piece of art. A glimmer of shrewdness flashed in the businessman's eyes. I have heard much about the exceptional young ladies cultivated by Madame Qin, and it appears the reputation is well-deserved. Halfway through the banquet, Madame Qin summoned Beiji to a corner. That gentleman is Mr. Li from Hengxin Group, and he seems quite interested in you. Go, dance with him. Beiji glanced at the man who could easily be her father, feeling a churn in her stomach. But young Master Lu, the Lu family is merely a stepping stone. Madame Qin scoffed. The Li family is where the real wealth lies. Do you think I invested so much in your upbringing for nothing?
Beiji clenched her fists,
her nails digging into her palm. Yet when she turned to approach Mr. Li, her face already wore a perfect smile. On the dance floor, Mr. Li's hand wandered at her waist, his breath reeking of alcohol. Beiji mechanically moved to the rhythm, suddenly catching sight of Lu Qinzhou laughing and chatting with a refined young lady. The girl's graceful demeanor marked her as a true heiress, in stark contrast to Beiji, who felt like a meticulously packaged counterfeit. Upon returning to the Qin residence, Beiji rushed into the bathroom, retching. The girl in the mirror was exquisitely made up, yet her eyes were hollow. Trembling, she retrieved painkillers from a hidden compartment and swallowed 3 in quick succession. It's worth it, she told her reflection. One day, I will make everyone look up to me. A month later, I completed my first independent Jing embroidery piece. Phoenix Nirvana. This work integrated my mother's Nirvana stitch and the traditional techniques taught by Madame Ruan, depicting a golden phoenix reborn from flames, each feather shimmering with the light of life. When Madame Ruan beheld the finished piece, she remained silent for a long while. Finally, she said, Qingji would be proud of you. Phoenix Nirvana was sent to Beijing to participate in the National Arts and Crafts Exhibition, unexpectedly winning the Special Innovation Award. The media clamored to report on the prodigious young talent, Wan Nanji, with collectors offering millions for the piece. Not for sale, I firmly told Madame Ruan. This is a tribute to my mother. Madame Ruan gently patted my head, her eyes brimming with pride. You have grown. After receiving the award, I began to experiment with incorporating more modern elements into traditional Jing embroidery. My mother's manual provided boundless inspiration, leading me to create the starry sky stitch, using silver threads and tiny pearls to depict the night sky. One night, I dreamt once more of the operating table. Madame Qin's icy voice echoed in my ears. Extract another rib. Mr. Wang favors the extreme waist-to-hip ratio. I awoke screaming, drenched in cold sweat. Madame Ruan rushed in, enveloping me in her embrace. Under the moonlight, I noticed the wrinkles on her face and her silver hair, yet felt an overwhelming sense of comfort. It's all behind us, she whispered, gently patting my back. You are now Ruan Nanji, the heir of Jing embroidery. No one can harm you. Leaning on her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of sandalwood, I gradually calmed down. In that moment, I finally understood what true family means, not the kind of relationship measured by profit that Madame Qin embodied, but a bond intertwined by blood and mutual understanding. The following day, Madame Ruan took me to the Qingshan cemetery on the outskirts of Suzhou. Before a modest gravestone, she laid down a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. Qingji,
I have brought Nanji to see you.
Madame Ruan's voice was soft, and she, like you, possessed remarkable talent. She is a good child. I knelt before the grave, incinerating a small sample of Phoenix Nirvana. The wisps of smoke rose gently, and in a moment of reverie, I seemed to glimpse my mother's smiling visage. Mother, I whispered, I will carry on the legacy of Jing embroidery. As I was leaving, Madame Wan informed me that Beiji had also visited this place.
When?
I asked, astonished. Last year, she secretly came here with Madame Qin to attend an event in Suzhou. Madame Wan sighed. That child wept bitterly, but the next day, she resumed her role as Qin's adopted daughter. A pang of sorrow pierced my heart. Did Beiji also yearn for familial affection? Yet she chose a different path. One that appeared glamorous, but was fraught with thorns. Upon returning to Tingwu Biyuan, I received a letter from Beijing. As I opened it, an embossed invitation slid out, a charity gala hosted by the Lu Group, with a note extending a sincere invitation to the Jing embroidery master, Wan Nanji. Will you attend? Madame Ruan inquired. After a moment of contemplation, I nodded. I wish to see Beiji. The gala is scheduled for next month. I have a premonition that this will be our first reunion since our rebirth. The last time she pierced my heart, what will transpire this time? As night enveloped the world, I sat before the embroidery frame, preparing a special gift for this reunion, a pair of brooches adorned with phoenix motifs, one crafted with gold thread, the other with silver. Regardless of how Beiji transforms, she will always remain my sister. The needle danced through my fingertips, and the golden phoenix gradually took shape. Outside the window, a bright moon hung high, casting its light upon Beiji and Beijing, upon my mother from 30 years ago, and upon countless needlewomen who have toiled beneath the lamp over the centuries. The Lu Group charity gala took place at the Peninsula Hotel, the most prestigious venue in Beijing. I stood in the hotel lobby, my palms slightly damp with perspiration. Since my rebirth at 18, this was my first return to Beijing, my first time dressing so formally, and my first appearance in a social setting as a Jing embroidery master. Nervous? Madame Wan adjusted the collar of my qipao. Today, she wore a dark green satin qipao, her hairpin adorned with that phoenix brooch. I took a deep breath. A bit. Remember, tonight you are an artist, not anyone's appendage. Madame Wan patted my hand, urging me to stand tall. The elevator ascended directly to the top-floor banquet hall. As the doors opened, a dazzling array of lights and a cacophony of voices surged forth like a tide. The crystal chandeliers refracted a blinding brilliance. The champagne tower sparkled in the center of the hall, and elegantly attired men and women congregated in clusters. The air thick with the fragrance of expensive perfumes and the scent of wealth. My gaze was instantly drawn to a colossal poster at the far end of the banquet hall, an enlarged, high-definition image of my work, Phoenix Nirvana. Beneath the poster, bold gilded letters proclaimed it the highlight piece of a charity auction. Master Wan, a sharply dressed middle-aged man, approached briskly. I am Zhao Ming, the PR director of the Lu Group. It is an honor to finally meet you. As we exchanged pleasantries, my eyes involuntarily scanned the crowd, searching for Beiji's silhouette. At that moment, a commotion erupted at the entrance of the banquet hall. Lu Qinzhou entered, escorting a formally dressed woman. She wore a silver mermaid gown, her waist so slender it seemed fragile, and a diamond necklace sparkled brilliantly in the light. Even though heavy makeup concealed her true features, I recognized her immediately, Beiji. She spotted me too, her steps faltering, her expression shifting through shock, confusion, and finally settling into a complex amalgam of emotions. Lu Qinzhou followed her gaze, raising an eyebrow. That is the Qin family's adopted daughter, Wan Beiji, Zhao Ming noted, who's been getting close to young Master Lu. Madame Wan gently squeezed my hand. Go say hello. I inhaled deeply and approached Beiji. 3 years had passed since we last met. She appeared even more exquisite, yet more fragile than I remembered. The neckline of her gown revealed collarbones, so sharp they seemed to protrude, and no amount of foundation could conceal the dark circles beneath her eyes. Beiji, I said, coming to a halt before her. She scrutinized me, her red lips curling into a sardonic smirk. Sister? What a surprise. How have you been? As you can see, she replied, spinning around, the silver gown flowing like water. Madame Qin treats me well. But I noticed her brow furrow slightly as she turned, clearly still discomfort by the tightness of her waist. I had worn such constricting gowns in my past life, and understood the agony of stifled breath. Lu Chunzhou observed us with keen interest. Do you know each other? We are sisters, Beiji interjected, her tone laden with an emotion I could not decipher. Long-lost sisters. How intriguing, Lu Chunzhou mused, his gaze lingering on my face. I greatly admire Master Ruan's work. I have prepared a surprise for you tonight. His tone sent a chill down my spine. Having attended numerous such galas in my past life, I knew that surprises often carried sinister intentions. Once the gala commenced, Madame Ruan and I were seated at the main table alongside the elders of the Liu family and several renowned artists.
Beizi, Hovefa,
Sat on the periphery with a group of wealthy heirs, deftly fending off advances from affluent businessmen, her face adorned with a flawless smile. First, I would like to thank everyone for attending the Liu Group Charity Gala. Lu Chunzhou began his speech from the stage. Tonight's highlight auction piece is Phoenix Nirvana by Jing embroidery master Wan Nanji, with a starting bid of 5 million. I glanced at Madame Wan in astonishment. She subtly shook her head, indicating she too was baffled by such a high starting price. The auctioneer began calling out bids, the numbers climbing at an astonishing pace. 8 million, 10 million, 15 million. When the bidding surpassed 20 million, the crowd gasped. 50 million. Lu Chunzhou suddenly raised his paddle. The banquet hall fell into an immediate hush. This price far exceeded the norms of the art market, bordering on absurdity. 50 million once, 50 million twice. The auctioneer surveyed the room. Sold. Thunderous applause erupted. Lu Chunzhou elegantly took the stage, accepting Phoenix Nirvana, then did something that took everyone by surprise. He turned and handed the embroidered piece to me. Master Wan. This work is far too precious for me to keep privately, he declared in a booming voice. Please allow me to bid on it, and then return it to you. The 50 million in donations will remain intact. The crowd gasped once more. Flashes from cameras erupted like a downpour, reporters clamoring to capture this dramatic moment. I stood in a daze until Madame Wan gently nudged me forward, prompting me to accept the embroidery. Thank you, I murmured, but noticed Lu Chunzhou's gaze drift past me to Madame Wan, his eyes betraying an inscrutable emotion. After descending from the stage, I was besieged by media and collectors alike. Surrounded, I answered questions about Jing embroidery techniques and my creative inspirations. Through the gaps in the crowd, I spotted Beiji standing in a corner, her eyes fixed on me, her champagne glass nearly crushed in her grip. Finally escaping the throng, I found Beiji standing alone on the terrace. The night breeze stirred her silver gown, making her resemble a cold statue. Here, I retrieved a small brocade box from my handbag, presenting it as my gift to her. Beiji hesitated before opening the box, revealing a silver-threaded phoenix brooch that contrasted beautifully with the golden one left by my mother. What does this mean? Her voice was taut. We're sisters, I softly replied. No matter what happens, that will never change. Beiji stared at the brooch, and suddenly a manic laugh escaped her lips. Sisters? Look at you. The celebrated artist basking in adoration, and what am I? She tugged at her waist. To maintain this figure, I can only drink meal replacement shakes every day.
Beizi.
Don't be so disingenuous, I exclaimed. She abruptly shut the box, her eyes blazing with anger. You know full well what the Qin family is like. Yet you stood by and watched me leap into that abyss. I stared at her in shock. I warned you. Warn me?
Beizi scoffed.
You should have been clearer. Clarify that Madame Qin would extract my ribs, that she would force me to take diet pills, that she would send me to the beds of those old men. My heart twisted in pain. Memories of a past life surged forth like a relentless tide. Those nights treated as mere bargaining chips. Those banquets where I was displayed as an exhibit. Those days that felt more torturous than living death. I thought my voice trembled. I believed you would lead a different life. Because of Lu Chunzhou? Beiji scoffed, a mocking smile gracing her lips. He doesn't even dare to touch me. Do you know why? Because he is enamored with artists like you. She leaned closer, the scent of her perfume mingling with a faint trace of medication. After tonight, the entire capital will know of the master of Jing embroidery, Wan Nanji, while I remain forever a mere beautiful plaything. Suddenly, the door to the terrace swung open, and Lu Chenzhou strode in. So, this is where you both are. Beiji instantly donned a flawless smile, her expression shifting with astonishing speed. Lu. I was just reminiscing with my sister. Lu Chenzhou's gaze flitted between us. Master Wan, may I have a word with you in private? A flicker of jealousy flashed in Beiji's eyes, yet she gracefully withdrew. Only Lu Chenzhou and I remained on the terrace as the night breeze turned slightly chilly. You resemble her, Lu Chenzhou remarked abruptly. Who? Your mother. He leaned against the railing, speaking of Wan Qingji, the most renowned talented woman in the capital 2 decades ago. My heart raced. You know my mother? My father knows her, he replied meaningfully. The Lu family business originated from the Lu embroidery house, which once collaborated with your grandfather. This revelation left me astounded. In my previous life, I had never heard of the Lu family's connection to embroidery, nor did I know they were acquainted with my mother. Why tell me this? Without directly answering, Lu Chenzhou produced a yellowed photograph from his suit pocket. Do you recognize this place? The image depicted a classical garden, white walls and black tiles, encircled by bamboo. Indeed, it was Tingwu Biyuan. Yet, the date inscribed in the corner indicated it was taken 30 years ago, when Madame Wan must have still been quite young. This was the Suzhou branch of the Lu embroidery house, Lu Chenzhou said, tucking the photograph away. It was later sold to the Wan family, your grandfather. I longed to inquire further, but at that moment, Madame Wan appeared at the terrace door. Nanji, it's time to cut the cake. Her voice was calm. Yet I noted her gaze turned icy upon encountering Lu Chenzhou. He bowed politely. Teacher Wan, it is an honor. An invisible spark seemed to ignite in the air. Madame Wan approached, linking her arm with mine. Mr. Lu, if you will excuse us. As we made our way back to the banquet hall, Madame Wan whispered, what did he say to you? About my mother? I hesitated, then added that Tingwu Biyuan used to belong to the Lu family. Madame Wan halted, her complexion draining. Stay away from him. There's not a decent person in the Lu family. It was the first time I had heard Madame Wan speak with such fervor. She was usually gentle and composed, yet at this moment, she seemed transformed. After the cake-cutting ceremony concluded, Beiji was summoned by Madame Qin to dance with a wealthy merchant. Watching her feigned smile, my heart twisted in anguish. This was precisely how I had descended into the abyss in my previous life. As the evening drew to a close, a waiter discreetly slipped me a note. Miss Beiji asked me to pass this to you. I excused myself to the restroom, locking the door before unfolding the note. It bore a single, hasty line, "Save me." The handwriting trembled, as if penned in a rush. I clutched the note tightly. What Beiji was experiencing was the very nightmare I had endured in my past life. Suddenly, a knock echoed at the restroom door. Master Wan, are you inside? Mister. Lu is looking for you. It was Zhao Ming's voice. I hastily tucked the note into my handbag. I'll be right out. Exiting the restroom, I scanned for Beiji, only to see her being pulled away by Madame Qin, her face ashen. I attempted to pursue them but was obstructed by a throng of reporters seeking an interview. By the time I managed to extricate myself, Beiji had vanished. On our way back to the hotel, Madame Wan remained silent. It was only upon entering our room that she finally spoke. Nanji, we must return to Suzhou as soon as possible. But Beiji, that child is already too deep in. Madame Wan shook her head. Qinya Yen would not easily relinquish her hold. I produced the crumpled note. She reached out to me for help. Madame Wan glanced at the note, letting out a long sigh. Tomorrow, I will meet with Qinya Yen. You stay at the hotel. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, my mind consumed with images of Beiji's forced smile and that plea for help. In my past life, I had no one to turn to, ultimately leading me to ruin. Now, with Beiji extending her hand to me, how could I not pull her back from the brink? Outside, the night sky of Beijing was painted a deep crimson by the neon lights. I retrieved the golden phoenix brooch, examining it intently under the moonlight. My mother bequeathed to me not only this brooch, but also the innate talent and passion for Jing embroidery that coursed through my veins. And what had Beiji inherited? We were identical twins, yet we had embarked on vastly different paths. In my past life, she had taken my life. In this life, could I save her? The moonlight cascaded like water upon the hotel carpet. In the distance, faint sirens wailed, for this city that never sleeps will never truly rest. much like the desires and pains harbored within certain hearts, eternally lurking in the shadows. At the Qin residence in Beijing, the iron gate slowly swung open before Madame Wan. The butler led us through the meticulously trimmed courtyard, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the aura of power. "Where is Qin Yan?" Madame Ruan's voice was cold and hard, starkly contrasting her usual gentleness. "The madam is waiting for you in the tea room." The butler cast a fleeting glance at me, clearly only inclined to meet with Teacher Wan. Madame Wan squeezed my hand. "Nanji, wait for me in the garden." I nodded, watching her follow the butler towards the main building. The Qin family's garden was extravagantly opulent, with rare flowers competing for attention and the central fountain casting rainbows in the sunlight. Yet amidst this artificial beauty, I felt an oppressive suffocation. As I rounded a cluster of roses, I unexpectedly discovered a path leading to the basement. Curiosity compelled me to quietly descend the stairs. The iron door to the basement was ajar, faint moans emanating from within.
Bei Sie?
I pushed the door open, the musty scent mingling with a medicinal odor engulfing me. In the dim light, Bei-shi lay curled up on a narrow bed, her silver gown crumpled around her, and her makeup faded. Hearing my voice, she struggled to lift her head, her eyes vacant. "Sister?" Her voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" I rushed to her side, horrified by her condition. Bei-shi's complexion was ashen, her lips cracked, her arms marred by needle marks, with empty medicine bottles and used syringes scattered by her bedside.
What have they done to you?
I trembled as I grasped her hand. Bei-shi managed a weak smile. The price of maintaining perfection, painkillers, nutritional injections. She suddenly erupted into a violent cough, blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. I hurriedly fetched a damp towel from the restroom, wiping her feverish forehead. Bei-shi's temperature was alarmingly high. She was clearly suffering from a severe infection. "You need to go to the hospital." "It's futile." Bei-shi grasped my wrist with surprising strength. "Madame Qin won't allow it. I'm her investment, and she hasn't recouped her costs yet." Her words twisted my stomach in knots. In my past life, I had been treated similarly when I burned with fever. Madame Qin had only cared about whether it would affect my next public appearance. Suddenly, a heated argument erupted from upstairs. Bei-shi and I both looked up. It was Madame Ruan and Madame Qin. Fear flickered in Bei-shi's eyes. Their encounters were always like this. I propped Bei-shi up, allowing her to lean against my shoulder. Her body felt alarmingly light, as if it were merely skin stretched over bone. "Do you know what grievances lie between them?" Bei-shi weakly shook her head. "I only heard Madame Qin say your mother owes me." A jolt coursed through me. What entanglement did my mother have with these two women? The argument grew nearer, accompanied by the sound of shattering porcelain. Suddenly, the basement door was flung open. Madame Qin storming in on her high heels, with Madame Ruan close behind. "So you are here." Madame Qin's meticulously made-up face twisted with rage. "Wan Qingwu, must you meddle in my family affairs?" Madame Ruan gasped upon seeing Bei-shi's state. "Qin Yan, you are committing a crime." "A crime?" Madame Qin retorted with a cold smirk. "I spent 3 million to adopt her and employed the finest tutors for her education.
Now.
I merely ask her to contribute to the family. What is the issue?" She turned to Bei-shi, her tone suddenly sweetening. "Darling, tell Madame Ruan. Has Mommy treated you poorly?" Bei-shi trembled involuntarily, responding mechanically. "Mommy has been very good to me."
See?
Madame Qin beamed with pride, as if her own words validated her. Madame Ruan stepped forward, positioning herself between Bei-shi and me. 3 million? I will offer 6 million for Bei-shi's guardianship." Madame Qin laughed as if she had heard a jest. 6 million? Do you have any idea what Lu Qinzhou's price is? 20 million. She leaned down, gripping Bei-shi's chin. "This is my meticulously cultivated masterpiece." I could no longer contain myself. She is a human being, not a commodity. Madame Qin's piercing gaze shifted to me, and she suddenly smiled. "Nanji, you are far more astute than your sister. Had you been chosen back then, your worth would be at least 30 million now." Her words pierced my heart like a knife. In my past life, I indeed fetched 30 million when sold to a 60-year-old mining tycoon. Madame Wan suddenly produced a document from her bag. "Qin Yan, take a look at this." Madame Qin, skeptical, took the document and, after a quick glance, her expression changed dramatically. "Where did you get this?" "That is of no consequence," Madame Wan replied coldly. "Either relinquish Bei-shi's guardianship, or these photographs will appear in major media outlets by tomorrow." I caught a glimpse of the document, which seemed to contain intimate photographs of Madame Qin with various men, all set against the backdrop of luxurious hotel rooms. Madame Qin clenched the document, her knuckles turning white. Ruan Qinggu, you are as despicable as your sister. Qingji has never harmed anyone. Madame Wan countered, unwavering. You are the one who has been living in the bitterness of the past. The confrontation between them rendered the air nearly palpable. Ultimately, Madame Qin sneered. Very well. You may take Beiji. But she is already ruined, drug addiction, gastric issues, renal failure. I am eager to see how you intend to revive a spoiled product. Before turning to leave, she cast a meaningful glance at me. Nanji, do not forget that the blood of the Ruan family flows through your veins. One day, you will comprehend the significance of the surname. Once Madame Qin had departed, Madame Ruan immediately dialed for an ambulance. Before the paramedics arrived, she assessed Beiji's condition, her expression growing increasingly grave. Severe infection, malnutrition, and drug dependency, she whispered to me. She will require long-term treatment. The siren of the ambulance grew louder as it approached. When the medical personnel lifted Beiji onto the stretcher, she had already slipped into a semi-conscious state, mumbling apologies. Madame Wan and I followed the ambulance to the finest private hospital in Beijing. After the doctor's diagnosis, we learned that Beiji's condition was worse than anticipated. In addition to what Madame Qin mentioned, she also suffered from mild anorexia and depression, necessitating at least 6 months of systematic treatment. Will she recover? I inquired of the doctor. He adjusted his glasses. The physical ailments can be addressed, but the psychological trauma. He shook his head. That requires time and professional psychological intervention. After completing the hospitalization procedures, Madame Ruan and I sat on a bench in the corridor. The setting sun outside painted the clouds crimson, reminding me of the dark red wine stains on Beiji's gown. Madame Ruan, I hesitantly asked, what animosity exists between you and Madame Qin? Why does she claim your mother owes her? Madame Ruan gazed out the window, remaining silent for a long while before speaking. That was 30 years ago. Qin Yayan, your mother, and I were once the best of friends. I stared at her in shock, unable to fathom how these 3 distinctly different women could have intersected. We all loved embroidery, studying under the same master. Madame Wan continued. Eventually, your mother, possessing the greatest talent, was selected to inherit the master's legacy. Qin Yayan became envious, believing the master favored her. Was it solely for that reason? Not entirely, Madame Wan sighed. Later, we both fell in love with the same man, Lu Qinzhou's father, Lu Yuanshan. This revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the peculiarities in Lu Qinzhou's demeanor toward Madame Wan, his understanding of my mother, and the words of Madame Qin. All suddenly made sense. In the end, whom did Lu Yuanshan choose? Neither of us, Madame Wan replied with a bitter smile. He married a woman of equal standing. Qin Yayan believed that Qingji had interfered, and thus she harbored resentment towards her ever since. As I processed this information, a question struck me. What about Beiji's father? He was a painter whom Qingji met later, a man who truly loved her. A tender expression surfaced in Madame Ruan's eyes. Unfortunately, they both left too soon. A groan from Beiji's hospital room drew our attention. When we entered, she was curled up in agony. The nurse informed us that this was a normal reaction to drug withdrawal. Watching Beiji's pale face, I could not help but recall the madness and despair in her eyes during her final moments in my past life when she had stabbed me. Had she also endured such suffering then? Madame Wan placed her hand on my shoulder. Nanji, you should return to the hotel and rest. I will stay here with her. I shook my head. I wished to be by her side. That night, I sat beside Beiji's hospital bed, observing her as she drifted between sleep and wakefulness. At one point, she suddenly grasped my hand, her eyes momentarily clear. Sister, why did you save me? Because we're sisters, I replied softly. Tears streamed silently down Beiji's face. But I killed you in my past life. A jolt of shock coursed through me, my heart nearly stopping. She too had been reborn? You remember? I remember. Beiji released my hand, turning toward the wall. Every knife, every drop of blood, and the look in your eyes before you died. I was at a loss for words, only able to sit in silence. After a while, Beiji's breathing grew steady, as if she had fallen asleep. I tiptoed out of the hospital room and curled up on a bench in the corridor, spending the night there. The next morning, Madame Wan brought a change of clothes and breakfast. She informed me that she had contacted the best rehabilitation center in Suzhou and that Beiji would be transferred there once her condition stabilized. She mentioned last night that she too had been reborn. I quietly disclosed to Madame Wan. She was not surprised. Fate has granted you both a second chance. It surely holds its purpose. Over the following 2 weeks, Beiji's physical condition gradually stabilized. The doctor announced that she could be discharged, but she would require regular follow-ups and psychological therapy. The day before her transfer, Lu Qinzhou unexpectedly appeared at the hospital door. Dressed impeccably in a suit and holding a bouquet of white calla lilies, he politely knocked on the door. "I heard Beiji was ill. I came to visit her," he explained with a smile. Upon seeing him, Beiji instinctively straightened her posture, adopting the practiced smile of a refined young lady. I noticed her fingers tightly clenching the sheets, her knuckles turning white. "How fortunate that the young master has time to visit me," Beishi's voice was sweet. Yet her gaze remained icy. Lu Qinzhou placed the flowers on the bedside. "After all, we are acquainted." He turned to me. "Master Wan, I heard that your new work, Nirvana Rebirth, has been collected by the Palace Museum? Congratulations." I watched him warily. "Thank you. I would like to visit you sometime to discuss collaboration." He handed me an embossed business card. The Lu family is preparing to invest in traditional handicrafts, with Jing embroidery as a key focus. Madame Wan suddenly entered from outside, visibly startled upon seeing Lu Qinzhou. "What brings you here?" "Master Wan," Lu Qinzhou bowed slightly, "my father often speaks of you, saying you are the foremost expert in Jing embroidery." Madame Ruan's expression shifted. "How is Lu Yuanshan?" "He passed away 5 years ago," Lu Qinzhou replied flatly, "lung cancer." After a moment of awkward silence, Lu Qinzhou took his leave. Once he departed, Beiji immediately discarded the bouquet into the trash. "Hypocrite," she seethed. "He and Madame Qin are cut from the same cloth." Madame Wan regarded the door with contemplation. "Nanji, keep your distance from Lu Qinzhou. The Lu family has ice water flowing in their veins." The transfer procedures went smoothly. On the day we left Beijing, the weather was exceptionally clear. Beiji sat in her wheelchair, gazing at the sky beyond the hospital gates, and suddenly remarked, "It feels like a caged bird witnessing the blue sky for the first time." I pushed her towards the vehicle arranged by Madame Wan, my heart awash with conflicting emotions. In my past life, the one who took my life, could I redeem her in this lifetime? Inside the car, Beiji continued to gaze at the fleeting scenery outside. When the highway sign indicated that we were 50 kilometers away from Suzhou, she suddenly spoke. "Sister, may I learn Jing embroidery?" I looked at her in astonishment, noticing a glimmer of long-lost brilliance in her eyes. "Of course," I replied. Madame Wan turned from the front seat. "As long as you are willing." Beiji lowered her head, her voice barely audible. "I want to attempt a fresh start." Outside the car window, sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a golden hue. I recalled my recently completed work, Nirvana Rebirth, showcasing a golden phoenix soaring from the ashes, with each feather radiating the brilliance of rebirth. Perhaps this was the essence of resurrection, not revenge, nor the repetition of past mistakes, but rather granting one another a chance to choose anew. No matter how shattered a life may be, there exists the potential for rebirth. The Suzhou Tranquil Rehabilitation Center is situated by the banks of Taihu Lake, its white-walled, dark-tiled buildings nestled amidst bamboo groves, far removed from the clamor of the world. The window of Beiji's hospital room faced a lotus pond, where pink lotuses stood gracefully in the summer breeze, wafting a faint fragrance. "Time for your medication," the nurse announced as she placed a small cup of pills on the bedside table. Beiji stared at the pills, her brow furrowed. Since being transferred here 2 weeks ago, she had to swallow an array of colorful tablets daily, antidepressants, endocrine regulators, and medication to alleviate withdrawal symptoms. "Can I take 2 fewer pills?" she softly pleaded. "My sister is coming today." The nurse shook her head. "The doctor's orders cannot be altered." "Miss Wan mentioned you would be trying embroidery today, correct?" Beiji nodded, obediently swallowing the pills. The bitter taste spread across her tongue, and she quickly chased it down with water. Once the nurse departed, Beiji approached the window and took a deep breath. The air here was refreshingly filled with moisture. A stark contrast to the polluted air mingled with exhaust and perfume in Beijing. She looked down at her arms. The needle marks had faded considerably, but her pale skin and protruding blue veins still served as reminders of her past downfall. A gentle knock sounded at the door, and I entered, carrying an embroidery frame and a basket of silk threads. "Feeling any better?" I placed the items on the table. Beiji forced a smile. "A bit better than yesterday." She gestured toward the pills. "These things make me feel dazed all day." I opened the embroidery frame, revealing a piece of plain white satin already stretched taut. "Today, I'll teach you the simplest form of straight-stitch embroidery. Let's start with a leaf." Beiji took the needle and thread, her fingers trembling slightly. She attempted to mimic my movements, but the needle pricked her fingers several times. "Damn it!" she exclaimed in frustration. "I can't even do this right." I picked up the needle and patiently demonstrated once more. "Don't rush. Embroidery demands calmness and patience." Beiji watched my nimble fingers and suddenly said, "Sister, I'm sorry." I looked up at her. "What for?" "In my past life, I killed you." Beiji's voice was barely a whisper. "I was envious of everything you possessed, unaware of the suffering you endured in the Qin family." I set down the needle and took her icy hand in mine. "It's all in the past. Don't you hate me?" Beiji lifted her gaze, tears brimming in her eyes. "I did hate you," I admitted honestly, "but Rebirth has granted me a new perspective. We were both manipulated. Madame Qin treated us as mere commodities, inciting jealousy and harm between us." Beiji's tears finally fell. "During those years in the Qin family, I felt like a living corpse. They injected me with drugs to maintain a perfect facade, yet never asked if I was in pain." I embraced her trembling shoulders, gently patting her back as Madame Ruan had once done for me. Beiji wept in my arms, as if she were shedding the grievances of both our past and present lives. "Do you know why my work is titled Phoenix Nirvana?" I spoke softly once she had calmed a bit. "The phoenix rises more beautiful from the flames. We can too." Beiji dried her tears and took up the needle again. "Teach me once more." This time, though her stitches were uneven, she managed to outline the shape of a leaf. Sunlight streamed through the gauzy window, dancing upon the silken threads in our hands as the vibrant colors seemed to come alive. In the days that followed, Beiji's progress was astonishing. The medication was gradually reduced, and her spirits improved significantly. Each day I visited her, bringing different embroidery patterns for her to practice. From straight stitches to back stitches, from monochrome to gradient colors, her work gradually took shape. On the day of her follow-up appointment a month later, the doctor was astonished to find improvements in all her indicators. "Incredible," he remarked. Flipping through the examination reports, the recovery period from medication dependency typically takes much longer. Madame Wan smiled. "Perhaps thread and needle are more effective than medication." That afternoon, we took Beiji to Tingwu Biyuan, her first encounter with the legendary garden. As we passed through the moon gate, her eyes widened in astonishment. "Is this the little courtyard you mentioned in your letter?" Beiji exclaimed incredulously, gazing at the pavilions and towers before her. "I thought it was merely a dilapidated farmhouse." Madame Wan chuckled softly. "Your sister is far too modest." Beiji curiously explored her surroundings, pausing for a long while at the entrance of the embroidery room. The array of embroidered pieces on display overwhelmed her, especially the unfinished 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. "This is Madame Ruan's masterpiece," I explained. "She has been working on it for 30 years. Beiji leaned in for a closer look, suddenly pointing to a small bird in the corner. "The stitching technique here is different." I was taken aback by her keen observation. "That is the layered green stitch, a technique uniquely created by my mother." "Mother?" It suddenly struck me that I had yet to tell Beiji about our lineage. I guided her to sit on the embroidery stool and recounted everything Madame Wan had revealed to us. Our mother, Wan Qingji, was her younger sister, a prodigy in Jing embroidery who severed ties with her family for love. "So Madame Wan is our aunt?" Beiji processed this information. "And we are of the Jing embroidery lineage?" I nodded, retrieving a photograph of our mother from my pocket. Beiji gazed at the gentle woman in the photo, her fingers brushing over the small brooch design. "I remember this," she said suddenly. "When I was very little, I had a similar one, but it was taken from me by a child in the orphanage." At some point, Madame Wan appeared at the doorway, cradling a redwood box. Qingji indeed made 2 brooches, one golden phoenix and one silver phoenix. She opened the box to reveal the silver phoenix brooch. "This is for you." Beiji took the brooch, her hands trembling slightly. The silver-threaded phoenix shimmered in the sunlight, contrasting starkly against her pale complexion. "I don't deserve it," Beiji murmured. "I wasted so much time chasing vanity. Before the phoenix can rise, it must endure the searing flames." Madame Wan pinned the brooch to Beiji's collar. "What matters is that you have chosen Rebirth now." That evening, Beiji decided to stay at Tingwu Biyuan. Madame Wan offered her the opportunity to reside here and learn Jing embroidery as long as she wished. In the stillness of the night, as I passed by Beiji's room, I heard muffled sobs. Pushing the door open, I found her sitting by the window, cradling the silver phoenix brooch in her hands. "Can't sleep?" I asked softly. Beiji hastily wiped her tears. "The cravings for the medication have returned. It feels as though ants are crawling all over me." She opened her palm to reveal crescent-shaped scars from where she had dug into her skin. "But I can no longer escape through drugs." I held her tightly, my heart aching for her. You will be all right. I am here with you. That night, we squeezed into the same bed as we had in the orphanage, as Beiji recounted her experiences in the Qin family, and I shared snippets of my time learning from Madame Wan. At the amusing parts, we even laughed aloud. Gradually, Beiji's breathing steadied, and she fell into a deep slumber on my shoulder. The following morning, Madame Wan took us to a hidden attic in the West Wing. The room was filled with ancient embroidery patterns and pieces, some of which had already yellowed and deteriorated. These were the fruits of labor from generations of the Wan family. Madame Wan delicately opened a beautifully bound booklet, within which lay Qingji's notes. Beiji and I leaned in closer to observe. It was a collection of design sketches, each page adorned with exquisite patterns, densely annotated with stitching techniques and color schemes. As we flipped to the middle, a photograph slipped out. In the image stood two young women at the entrance of Tingwu Biyuan, one strikingly resembling Madame Wan, while the other bore a remarkable likeness to our mother. The back bore an inscription, Qingwu and Qingji, summer of 1985. To Qingji, may our daughters soar like phoenixes. Beiji's voice trembled. Madame Wan gently caressed the photograph. This was taken on the day you both turned a month old. Qingji specifically returned from Beijing to bless you sisters. I gingerly cradled the photograph, as if holding a fragment of a long-lost memory. Our mother's smile radiated warmth, her eyes brimming with hope for the future. Who could have foreseen that mere years later, she would succumb to illness, leaving us sisters to cling to one another in an orphanage? Suddenly, Beiji turned and fled the attic. I chased after her, finding her silently weeping in a corner of the garden. She loved us so much, Beiji choked out. And yet, I have turned out this way. At a loss for words, I could only grasp her hand tightly. Some wounds cannot be mended by mere words. Time flowed like a gentle stream. Beiji's embroidery skills blossomed rapidly. The doctor remarked that her recovery was exceeding expectations. As summer waned and autumn approached, the flowers in the lotus pond withered, giving way to plump seed pods. Beiji had begun to independently complete simple works and even ventured into the technique of gold thread embroidery. One day, a dapper gentleman visited, introducing himself as the procurement director of a luxury goods group. Master Wan, we wish to order a batch of Jing embroidery handbags. He presented his business card, assuring that price was no object. I glanced at the design drafts he brought and shook my head. I'm sorry, but I only create original works. 5 million. Just for 50 pieces. He persisted. Beiji's eyes widened in disbelief. 5 million. This was more than double what Madame Qin had originally asked for. Art is not a commodity. I politely declined, suggesting that if he appreciated Jing embroidery, he might attend the Suzhou Intangible Cultural Heritage exhibition next month. After he left, crestfallen, Beiji asked, "Why did you refuse? 5 million is no small sum. Those designs are utterly trite, merely catering to Western stereotypes of Eastern aesthetics," I explained. Mother once wrote that Jing embroidery is a dialogue between heart and hand, not a product of assembly lines. Beiji pondered. At the Qin family, they only taught me how to sell myself for a good price. Madame Wan entered, overhearing this. Value is not measured in currency. Qingji would rather live in poverty than compromise her artistic ideals. That is the spirit of the Wan family. In the evening, a courier delivered an exquisite sandalwood box, inside of which lay a roll of gold thread, more delicate than any available on the market. The accompanying card read, Lu Family Collection, returned to its rightful owner, Lu Qinzhou. Upon seeing the gold thread, Madame Ruan's expression changed abruptly. This is Ming Dynasty gold thread used for restoration at the Forbidden City. It has long been discontinued. Should we return it? I inquired. After a long moment of contemplation, Madame Ruan decided, let us keep it for now. But do not use it. The Lu family never engages in unprofitable dealings. This gift must have ulterior motives. Beiji anxiously eyed the gold thread. What does Lu Qinzhou truly want? I do not know, Madame Ruan replied solemnly, but the truth will eventually emerge. As night deepened, I practiced the newly learned overlapping scale stitches in the embroidery room. Beiji entered, holding an embroidery frame. I stitched this. She shyly presented it. On it was a silver phoenix poised to take flight. Though the stitches were not yet refined, it possessed an enchanting spirit. What astonished me most was that she had utilized Mother's unique overlapping green stitch to convey the feather's layered texture. How did you learn this technique? I asked. I may have picked it up while watching you practice, Beiji chuckled bashfully. Perhaps it's truly in our blood. I tenderly caressed the silver phoenix. Suddenly grasping that rebirth signifies not merely correcting past errors, but reclaiming the life one was meant to lead. Beiji and I were like the golden and silver phoenix brooches, two sides of the same coin. Outside, the autumn moonlight bathed the lotus pond, casting shadows of the withered lotus that swayed in the water as if performing a serene dance. Tomorrow, Beiji would formally become Madame Yuan's apprentice, commencing her systematic study of Jing embroidery. Meanwhile, I would delve deeper into the mysteries of the stitching techniques left by our mother. Lu Chunzhou's gift lay quietly in the rosewood box, shimmering with an enigmatic golden hue beneath the moonlight. As Madame Yuan had said, there must be a scheme behind this goodwill. Yet tonight, let us temporarily set aside our worries and savor this rare moment of tranquility, for tomorrow heralds a new beginning. At 3 a.m, I was roused by a faint rustling sound. The noise emanated from the embroidery room, strikingly clear in the stillness of the night. Wrapping myself in a robe, I followed the sound and opened the door to find Beiji hunched over the embroidery frame, her needle and thread darting swiftly in her hands. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting a silvery halo around her. She was utterly absorbed in her work, unaware of my approach. I held my breath, standing behind her, gazing at the design on the frame, and my eyes widened in astonishment. 2 phoenixes, one gold and one silver, entwined in a perfect circle. The gold phoenix was crafted using the traditional gold thread technique taught by Madame Yuan, while the silver phoenix employed Mother's unique overlapping green stitch, giving its feathers a remarkable three-dimensionality. Most astonishingly, Beiji had incorporated the gold thread sent by Lu Chunzhou into her piece.
Baitzi?
I whispered. She jolted, the needle pricking her finger, and a droplet of blood fell onto the silver phoenix's wing, glistening like a ruby. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I quickly fetched some gauze. When did you learn this? Beiji sucked on her finger, a hint of confusion in her eyes. I couldn't sleep. This design kept swirling in my mind, and my hands just moved on their own. I carefully lifted the embroidery frame. This piece, titled Twin Phoenixes, though technically still unrefined, displayed exquisite composition. And the 2 phoenixes appeared vividly alive, especially the silver phoenix, which exuded an almost palpable sense of impending flight. You used Lu Chunzhou's gold thread. Only then did Beiji realize, her expression shifting. I forgot that Madame Yuan said not to use it. I just felt that this thread suited the silver phoenix so perfectly. It's all right. Madame Yuan's voice suddenly emerged from the doorway. Since it has been used, let it fulfill its purpose. We turned to see Madame Yuan in her morning robe, her gaze intricately examining the twin phoenixes. Madame Yuan, I began. No need for explanations. She interrupted, stepping closer and gently tracing the silver phoenix's wing with her finger. This overlapping green stitch possesses more spirit than even Nanji's work. My heart skipped a beat. Madame Yuan seldom bestows praise lightly, let alone such a comparison. A blush crept onto Beiji's cheeks, her eyes sparkling with a long-lost brilliance. Is it truly that good? She asked softly. It's exceptional, far beyond that of a novice. Madame Yuan scrutinized the piece, especially the silver phoenix, which bore the essence of Qingji in her youth. Beiji's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she gazed at her fingers, once marred by the scars of addiction, now transformed into a testament of artistic creation. Madame Yuan suddenly furrowed her brow. This drop of blood. Beiji and I tensed simultaneously. In traditional Jing embroidery, blood is a significant taboo, signifying a broken appearance. To our surprise, Madame Yuan chuckled. Qingji often said that accidental mistakes are often fated. This drop of blood has landed perfectly on the silver phoenix's wing tip, reminiscent of the flames during a phoenix's rebirth. She turned and retrieved a brocade box from a cabinet, revealing several rolls of antiqued silver thread. This is the moonlight thread left by Qingji, crafted using a secret technique. And it was originally a pair with that roll of gold thread. Beiji took the silver thread and examined it closely under the moonlight. The surface of the silver thread shimmered with a pearlescent glow, more supple than ordinary silver thread. Let us use this to re-embroider the silver phoenix, Madame Yuan remarked. As for this blood-stained piece, I shall help you preserve it. As dawn gradually broke, the 3 of us found ourselves in the embroidery room, conversing until the sun rose. Madame Yuan, in a rare moment, recounted numerous tales from her youth, how she ingeniously created the verdant needle, how she relinquished her inheritance for love, and how, after our births, she resumed her embroidery to craft a brooch for each of us sisters. Qingji often stated that the golden phoenix represents tradition, while the silver phoenix symbolizes innovation. Madame Yuan gently caressed Beiji's hair ends, saying, You sisters are akin to these two phoenixes, one serene, one vibrant, one protective, one innovative. After breakfast, Beiji and I strolled by the lotus pond. The autumn sun cast a gentle glow upon the water surface, where the reflections of withered lotus plants appeared as serene as an ink-washed painting. Madame Wan had never shared such insights with me before. I whispered about Mother's philosophies and the meanings of the golden and silver phoenixes. Beiji picked up a flat pebble and skipped it across the water. Perhaps she has been waiting for the moment I truly awaken. The stone danced upon the surface 5 times, creating ripples that spread outward. Beiji turned to me, her eyes holding a clarity I had never witnessed before. Sister, when I killed you in our past life, did you hate me? I paused for a moment, then truthfully replied, I did harbor hatred, yet more so. I was perplexed as to why my own sister would strike me down. Because I was consumed by jealousy. Beiji's voice was eerily calm. Madame Qin speaks daily of your exceptional qualities, insisting I will never measure up to you. She clenched her fists, but what I loathe more is that you, fully aware of the Qin family's treacherous depths, stood by as I leapt into the abyss. A tremor coursed through me. In my past life, I had indeed hesitated to warn Beiji, ultimately choosing silence, partly out of self-interest and partly because I doubted she would believe me. I am sorry. I grasped her cold hand. I should have been more resolute in preventing you. Beiji shook her head. We have both erred. Fortunately, fate has granted us a chance to begin anew. She opened her palm, revealing fine needle marks and calluses. I extended my hand, mirroring hers. Mine bore the marks of embroidery. 2 hands, one delicate and pale, the other long and strong, yet both embodying the Wan family's innate talent for Jing embroidery. Young ladies. The butler hurriedly approached. There are guests in the main hall. Madame Wan requests your presence.
So early? Who is it?
I inquired. The butler's expression grew grave. Mr. Liu from the Liu group. Beiji and I exchanged a glance and quickened our pace. The sudden visit from Liu Qinzhou must harbor some ulterior motive. In the main hall, Liu Qinzhou, clad in a deep gray suit, was engaging politely with Madame Wan over tea. Upon our entrance, he stood and smiled. Master Wan, Miss Beiji, I apologize for the intrusion. Sunlight filtered through the intricately carved window, casting dappled shadows upon his sharply defined features. I noted he was not wearing his gold-rimmed glasses today, which lent his gaze an even sharper intensity. What brings you here, Mr. Liu? Madame Wan's tone was frosty. Unperturbed, Liu Qinzhou leisurely retrieved a document from his briefcase. My father, before his passing, instructed me to retrieve that item. Madame Wan's countenance shifted dramatically. What item? You know it well. Liu Qinzhou maintained a smile. The heirloom that Wan Qingji took from the Liu family 30 years ago. My heart raced as I glanced at Madame Wan. Her hands clenched into fists, knuckles whitening. Liu Yuanshan explicitly promised that item would belong to Qingji. Promises without evidence are mere words. Liu Qinzhou opened the document, revealing a notarized copy from that time, stating it was to be held temporarily, rather than granted. Beiji suddenly stepped forward. What item holds such significance that it warrants an early morning demand? Liu Qinzhou's gaze shifted to Beiji. A flicker of admiration flashing in his eyes as he took in her simple white qipao, the silver phoenix brooch gleaming at her collar. An heirloom vital to the Liu family's legacy, he said meaningfully. Miss Wan, should you be interested, perhaps you could persuade Madame Wan. Once it is returned to its rightful owner, the Liu family would be willing to fund the establishment of an embroidery workshop for you sisters. I scoffed. Thank you for your kind offer, Mr. Liu, but we are not in need of financial support. Is that so? Liu Qinzhou surveyed the surroundings. I hear Wubia Courtyard is in disrepair, and maintenance costs can be quite steep, not to mention Miss Beiji's medical expenses. Madame Wan abruptly slammed her hand on the table. Liu Qinzhou, you are not welcome here. Unfazed, Liu Qinzhou tucked away the document. Madame Wan, please do not be agitated. My father often remarked on your fiery temperament, which contrasts sharply with Miss Qingji's. Those words struck Madame Wan like a dagger. She swayed slightly, and I hastened to steady her. Beiji suddenly approached Liu Qinzhou, looking directly into his eyes. Mr. Liu, do you know why I left the Qin family? Liu Qinzhou raised an eyebrow. I would be eager to hear. Because I grew weary of being treated as a mere pawn in a transaction. Beiji's voice was soft yet resolute. Now, please leave. Liu Qinzhou chuckled, seemingly amused. How intriguing. Qin Yayan described you as a spineless porcelain doll. It seems she was mistaken. He leaned closer, whispering in Beiji's ear, consider my proposal. You possess more spirit than your sister. You should not be overlooked. Beiji stepped back, the silver phoenix brooch shimmering in the sunlight. Please depart. Lu Chenzhou shrugged and walked toward the door. Just before exiting, he turned back to say, I shall return in 3 days. I hope by then, Madame Wan will have reconsidered. He cast a significant glance at me. Some matters, when held too tightly, may bring calamity. His silhouette vanished behind the screen, leaving the hall in profound silence. Madame Wan collapsed into the armchair, her complexion pale. Madame Wan, what is the heirloom he mentioned? I inquired softly. Madame Wan shook her head and walked toward the inner chamber. Not now. Please continue your practice. I am feeling fatigued. Beiji and I exchanged puzzled glances. The butler approached, speaking in hushed tones. Madame Wan always reacts this way when meeting with the Lu family. What incident? Beiji pressed. The butler hesitated, ultimately shaking his head. Let us wait until Madame Wan is willing to share. During lunch and dinner that day, Madame Wan did not appear. We had the kitchen prepare some light congee and side dishes, which I brought to her door. Knocking yielded no response, so I gently pushed the door ajar. Madame Wan sat by the window, clutching a yellowed photograph, her shoulders quivering slightly. I dared not interrupt, quietly placing the tray down and retreating. Beiji awaited my report in the embroidery room. Upon seeing my shake of the head, she bit her lip. I will ask Madame Qin.
What?
I recalled her mentioning the grievances between the Wan and Lu families during my time at the Qin household. Beiji retrieved her phone. And although she had deleted her contact information, the number remained in my memory. I grasped her hand. It is too dangerous. What if she informs Lu Chenzhou? Using a public phone, Beiji's eyes sparkled with determination. Sister, we have the right to know the truth. Ultimately, we compromised, deciding to remain still, waiting for Madame Wan to stabilize before inquiring. That night, Beiji insisted on re-embroidering the double phoenix piece, intending to complete the silver phoenix section with the moonlit thread left by our mother. I accompanied her in the embroidery room until the depths of night. Strangely, Beiji seemed to embroider the silver phoenix effortlessly, while the golden phoenix was a struggle for her. Conversely, I found the golden phoenix easy to stitch. Yet the silver phoenix eluded me. It appeared we truly embodied the essence of the golden and silver phoenixes. Beiji jested, you uphold tradition, I innovate. I nodded with a smile, yet my thoughts lingered on what Madame Wan had said. Qingji often remarked that the golden phoenix signifies tradition, while the silver phoenix symbolizes innovation. Could it be that we sisters had indeed inherited different facets of our mother's talent? At midnight, we returned to our rooms to rest. Just as I lay down, my phone vibrated with a message from Beiji. Come to my room. It's urgent. I hurried over to find Beiji staring at her laptop, her face ashen. Look at this. On the screen was a scanned old news article from 30 years ago. Famous embroiderer Wan Qingji dies in a car accident. The driver fled the scene. The date of the report coincided with the day of our mother's passing. I searched for my mother's name and found the same article. Beiji's voice trembled. Look at the last paragraph. I leaned closer to the screen and read a small line at the bottom of the report. It is said that prior to the incident, Wan Qingji had a heated argument with the head of the Lu embroidery workshop. Lu Chenzhou's father? I gasped in shock.
Bald sie shoot her Laptop.
Her eyes ablaze with fury. Sister, our mother's death may not have been an accident. Outside the window, a cold moon hung high in the sky. The autumn wind swept across the lotus pond, the withered lotus swaying as if silently accusing something. What truly transpired 30 years ago? What is the heirloom that Lu Chenzhou speaks of? Why does Madame Wan hold this matter in such deep secrecy? These questions swirled in my mind until dawn's light began to break. Beiji, resting her head on my shoulder, clutched tightly to the silver phoenix brooch. I gently covered her with a blanket, silently vowing, this time, I must protect my sister, ensuring that the tragedies of the past do not repeat themselves. Regardless of Lu Chenzhou's desires or the grievances between the Wan and Lu families, we, as sisters, will face it all together. Just like in the double phoenix painting, with the golden and silver phoenixes entwined, each indispensable. Come in, Madame Wan rasped, pushing open the door to the innermost room of the West Wing. Beiji and I exchanged a glance before following her into this previously uncharted chamber. The room was sparsely furnished, containing only a writing desk and a few antiquated camphor wood boxes. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting mottled shadows on the blue brick floor. Madame Wan retrieved a copper key from her bosom and unlocked the lowest box. Dust swirled as she carefully lifted out an object wrapped in red silk and placed it on the desk. 30 years have passed, and her fingers gently caressed the fabric. I had thought the secret would be buried with me. As the red silk unfurled, it revealed an ancient sandalwood box, intricately carved with phoenix motifs. Though one corner was unmistakably charred, leaving an unsightly scar. "Is this our mother's?" I whispered. Madame Juan nodded and removed a small silver key from around her neck, inserting it into the box's lock. With a soft click, the lid slowly sprang open, releasing a faint herbal scent mingled with the stale odor of blood. Inside lay a piece of faded brocade, neatly arranged with several spools of embroidery thread, a silver needle, and a blood-stained embroidered patch that took my breath away. "This is—"
Baiji gasped, covering her mouth.
Madame Juan cautiously unfolded the embroidered patch. The design was blurred, yet one could still discern a phoenix in flight, with a striking dark red stain upon its chest. Qingji's blood. Madame Juan's voice trembled. She clutched this patch tightly in her final moments, refusing to let go. A sharp pain twisted in my stomach as I reached out to touch the bloodstain, only to retract my hand midway. This was our mother's blood, her last mark upon this world. "What heirloom does Lu Qinzhou seek?" Beiji asked directly. Madame Juan retrieved a thin booklet from a hidden compartment within the box. Its cover was inscribed with delicate characters, "The Secret Techniques of Ruan Family Embroidery." "This is the ancestral embroidery manual of the Lu family, which Qingji obtained from Lu Yuanshan," I remarked, carefully opening the booklet. It contained rare techniques of Jing embroidery, some of which I had never encountered before. Yet, on the final page, a yellowed note was tucked inside, hastily scrawled with a few lines. "Lu family substitutes inferior materials for superior ones, mixing copper with gold thread, deceiving both the emperor and the heavens." I looked up at Madame Juan. "Evidence," she stated, her eyes ignited with fury. 30 years ago, the Lu embroidery house fabricated dragon robes for the imperial court, but they mixed copper into the gold thread for profit. When Qingji discovered this, she stole the manual documenting the methods of authenticity verification.
Baizi inhaled sharply.
So, Lu Yuanshan sent people to hunt her down. Madame Ruan's voice choked. That car accident was no accident. I clutched the note tightly, the paper crinkling softly in my palm. Our mother protected not only the family secrets, but also a piece of evidence that could destroy the Lu family. Why not reveal it earlier?
Baizi inquiret.
There was no concrete proof. Madame Ruan shook her head. Qingji only had time to send this manual. She couldn't specify which batch of gold thread was tainted. And Lu Yuanshan destroyed all the accounts. I flipped to the last page of the booklet, suddenly noticing a line of minuscule numbers along the edge. Winter of the Jiaxu year, batch number 765. "Is this a clue?" Madame Ruan stood up abruptly. "I never noticed. Let me find the records." She hurried to the bookshelf and retrieved a hefty ledger. "We found it in the Jiaxu year. That winter, the Lu family indeed produced a batch of dragon robes for the imperial court, numbered from 765 to 770.
Baizi leaned closer.
If we can locate those dragon robes, we can prove that the Lu family deceived the emperor with copper-laced gold thread." I added, "In ancient times, this was a capital offense. Even now, it would be enough to ruin the Lu family's reputation." Suddenly, Madame Ruan began to cough violently, her face paling. Beiji and I quickly helped her to sit down, but she grasped our hands tightly. Lu Qinzhou must have surmised that his father's deeds would be exposed, which is why he is so eager to retrieve this manual. Just then, the butler rushed in. "Madame Ruan, Mr. Lu is here again, accompanied by several men who appear to be bodyguards." "So soon?" Beiji's face turned pale. "Wasn't it said he would come in 3 days?" Madame Ruan hurriedly wrapped the booklet and embroidered patch, thrusting them into my hands. "Nanji, take this out through the back door and find Director Liang."
"No."
I shook my head resolutely. "We will face this together." Beiji suddenly snatched the package. "I'll draw them away. Sister, you protect Madame Ruan." I stared at her in disbelief. The Beiji of my past life would never have made such a self-sacrificial choice. "No, it's too dangerous," Madame Ruan urged. Beiji was already at the door, turning back with a smile. "Don't worry. I may not have learned much at the Qin family, but I know how to deal with people like this." From the courtyard came Lu Qinzhou's impatient voice. There was no time for debate. I quickly made a decision. "We'll all go together. Let's head to the embroidery room. There's a side door there." As we dashed out of the west wing, the sound of the front gate being kicked open echoed behind us. Beiji led the way as we ducked through the corridor, only to be confronted by 2 bodyguards in black. "Madame Ruan, where are you rushing off to?" Lu Qinzhou strolled out from behind the bodyguards, a feigned smile plastered on his face. Madame Wan stepped in front of us. Lu Qinzhou, trespassing into private property is against the law. I am merely here to retrieve what belongs to the Lu family. His gaze fell upon the package in my hands. It seems you have found it.
Baiji suddenly laughed.
Mr. Lu, are you making such a fuss over an old booklet? Lu Qinzhou narrowed his eyes. Miss Beiji, I thought we had reached an understanding. What understanding? I asked warily. Did she not inform you?
Lu Shen vous feignait de surprise.
Last time we met. Miss Beiji agreed to help me obtain the manual in exchange for my assistance in her return to high society. I looked at Beiji in shock. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but she quickly regained her composure. Mr. Lu, your memory is poor. I said I would consider it, not that I agreed. Lu Qinzhou let out a cold laugh, signaling the bodyguards to step forward. Enough of the pleasantries. Hand over the items, and I can pretend nothing happened. On what grounds? I shielded the package. On this. Lu Qinzhou pulled out a photograph from his pocket, depicting Beiji in a vulnerable state after being drugged at the Qin family. If you don't want these photos to make the headlines tomorrow, cooperate. Beiji's complexion drained of color, her body trembling slightly. I wrapped my arms around her shoulders. Despicable. Just typical business tactics. Lu Qinzhou shrugged off my outrage. What do you think? An old manual for Miss Beiji's reputation. Quite the bargain, wouldn't you agree? I turned to Beiji, whose eyes brimmed with tears of humiliation. Memories of my past life surged forth. I too had once been coerced, treated as a bargaining chip. But this time, I would not repeat the past. She is my sister, not a commodity. I glared at Lu Qinzhou. You will not threaten anyone with such tactics again. Lu Qinzhou's smile faded, his expression darkening. You're asking for trouble.
Attack.
The bodyguards lunged forward to seize the package. In the ensuing chaos, Beiji suddenly shouted, "Throw it!" As she tossed the package toward the lotus pond, the bodyguards instinctively turned to chase after it, and the package splashed into the water with a loud plop.
No.
Lu Qinzhou roared, racing toward the pond. Seizing the opportunity, Madame Wan pulled us toward the side door. Behind me, the frantic curses of Lu Qinzhou and the sound of bodyguards plunging into the water echoed. We sprinted through the narrow alleyways and hailed a taxi. To the embroidery museum, Mrs. Wan gasped to the driver. Inside the vehicle, Beiji suddenly produced the red silk pouch, revealing that she had stealthily swapped the booklet earlier. What she had tossed into the lotus pond was merely an ordinary embroidery manual. When did you? I gasped in astonishment as he mentioned the photographs. Beiji flashed a cunning smile. Madame Qin taught me to prepare my bargaining chips in advance during negotiations. Mrs. Wan embraced her tightly, exclaiming, "Good child." Director Liang of the museum, an old friend of Mrs. Wan, immediately arranged for the booklet and embroidery samples to be photographed and archived upon hearing our story. And he contacted experts in artifact appraisal. If we can prove that this batch of dragon robes indeed contains counterfeit gold thread, it will be a significant historical discovery. Director Liang said excitedly. The history of the Lu family's rise will be completely rewritten. The expert appraisal would take time. And Director Liang arranged for us to stay at the museum's guest house. Late at night, I tossed and turned in bed, then quietly made my way to the balcony. Beiji was already there, gazing dreamily at the starry sky.
What are you thinking about?
I inquired. My mother, Beiji whispered. She knew the dangers, yet chose to protect the truth. If it were me, I might not possess such courage. I held her hand, saying, "You were very brave tonight." Beiji smiled wryly. In a past life, I would kill my own sister for fame and fortune. Looking back, it truly was madness. The night breeze tousled her hair, and under the moonlight, her profile blended with that of her mother in the photograph. I suddenly realized that Beiji's transformation was not merely an escape from the Qin family's control, but a reclamation of the noble spirit that belonged to the Wan family. What shall we do next?
Baizi asked.
We wait for the appraisal results to be revealed, then we shall disclose everything, I declared firmly. The truth, safeguarded by my mother with her life, should no longer be buried. Beiji nodded and suddenly produced a small paper package from her pocket. Oh, here. This is for you. I opened the package to find a strand of gold thread intertwined with a strand of silver. Taken from the double phoenix piece, Beiji explained. The golden phoenix and the silver phoenix are both indispensable, just like us. I wrapped the golden and silver threads around my wrist as a bracelet. In the moonlight, the gold and silver shimmered together, reflecting how we, as sisters, each uphold tradition and embrace innovation, yet both flow with the blood of the Wan family, inheriting our mother's artistic spirit. In the distance, the silhouette of the museum loomed majestically against the night sky. What would we face tomorrow? Would Lu Qinzhou relent? What impact would the revelation of the truth have on the Lu family? These questions remained unanswered for now. But in this moment, holding Bei Zhi's hand, feeling the warmth of her palm, I experienced an unprecedented sense of tranquility and determination. No matter what lay ahead, we would soar like phoenixes, as our mother wished. Never to yield. The results are in. Director Liang burst through the conference room door, waving a report in his hand. The testing results confirmed that the gold thread in that batch of dragon robes contained a staggering 30 copper. Mrs. Wan took the report, her fingers trembling slightly. Indeed. It is as we suspected. Bei Zhi and I leaned in to scrutinize the data on the report. Scientific testing does not lie. Those gold threads were merely gilded on the surface, with a core of copper zinc alloy, entirely failing to meet the standards required for imperial court use. This constituted a crime of deceiving the emperor in ancient times. Director Liang adjusted his glasses, stating, "Even now, this is serious commercial fraud." Bei Zhi scoffed. No wonder Lu Qinzhou is so anxious. Once this is exposed, the Lu family stock price will plummet by at least half. Outside, the morning sun in Suzhou was just right, and the square in front of the museum already had a smattering of visitors. Who would have thought that beneath this calm facade, a storm regarding the truth from 30 years ago was brewing? I have contacted several mainstream media outlets. Director Liang informed us. A press conference will be held at 2 o'clock this afternoon to announce this discovery. Mrs. Wan nodded and turned to Bei Zhi and me. Before the press conference, I want to show you something. Following Director Liang to the museum's treasure repository, we passed through layers of security. He retrieved a piece of embroidery wrapped in acid-free paper from a temperature and humidity-controlled safe. As Mrs. Wan slowly unfolded the embroidery, I gasped in shock. An unfinished piece titled "100 Birds Paying Homage to the Phoenix" revealed itself before us, with the central golden phoenix only half complete and most of the surrounding birds merely outlined. Yet even as a half-finished work, the exquisite craftsmanship and unique design were evident. The phoenix's feathers utilized my mother's original overlapping green needle technique, showcasing a marvelous three-dimensional effect in the light. This was Qing Zhi's last piece, Mrs. Wan gently caressed the embroidery, her voice choked with emotion. She intended to complete it by the time you turned 1. But unexpectedly, Bei Zhi leaned in for a closer look, suddenly pointing at the area around the phoenix's eye. "Why is there a bloodstain here?"
Indeed.
A small patch of dark red stain marked the left eye of the golden phoenix. Mrs. Wan closed her eyes. When Qing Zhi was murdered, this embroidery was beside her. Blood splattered upon it, and I secretly preserved it, never daring to continue stitching.
My heart jolted.
My mother's blood mingled with the embroidery thread, becoming her final mark left for this world. "Now, I wish for you to complete it." Mrs. Wan opened her eyes, her gaze shifting between Bei Zhi and me. "Nan Zhi will handle the traditional portion, while Bei Zhi will attempt Qing Zhi's innovative needle techniques. You sisters will join forces to finish your mother's unfinished work." Bei Zhi and I exchanged glances and nodded simultaneously. This was not only a continuation of artistic legacy, but also the best tribute to our mother. Director Liang arranged for us to use the museum's finest studio. Time was of the essence, and we immediately immersed ourselves in our work. I was responsible for stitching the traditional bird portions, while Bei Zhi tackled the challenging feathers of the phoenix. Mrs. Wan stood nearby, guiding us and occasionally correcting our stitching techniques. "Nan Zhi, the tail feathers of this peacock should be done with gold thread and seed stitching," Mrs. Wan instructed.
Bei Zhi.
"The wings of the phoenix should use your mother's original overlapping scales technique. Pay attention to the layering." We were engrossed in our stitching, barely pausing for lunch. As time passed, the blank spaces on the embroidery gradually filled with vibrant threads. Remarkably, despite our differing styles, Bei Zhi and I found an unexpected harmony in our stitching. Much like the golden phoenix and the silver phoenix, each possessing unique characteristics yet complementing one another beautifully. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Director Liang hurried in. "The reporters have all arrived, and Lu Qinzhou is here too, accompanied by a team of lawyers." Mrs. Ruan's expression darkened. What does he intend to do? To accuse us of defamation and demand to see the evidence. Director Liang wiped the sweat from his forehead. Fortunately, the testing report is irrefutable. I glanced at the embroidery. Only a few final stitches remained. Just give us 10 more minutes. Bei Zhi's fingers danced swiftly, the silver needle carrying the golden thread gliding over the fabric. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead, but her expression remained terrifyingly focused. I completed the tail feathers of the final bird, snipped the thread, and let out a long breath. It's finished, Mrs. Ruan's voice trembled. Qingji has been reborn through you. We carefully placed the embroidery into a specially designed glass display case and wheeled it toward the press conference venue. In the corridor, I noticed Beiji's hand trembling slightly. Nervous? I whispered. She nodded. It's my first time facing so many media outlets. I've only appeared in gossip columns before. I grasped her hand. This time is different. You will present yourself as an artist, not as anyone's accessory. The press conference was held in the museum's multifunctional hall. As we pushed open the door, blinding flashes of light greeted us, and dozens of media outlets pointed their cameras at us. Seated in the front row was Lu Qinzhou, impeccably dressed. His smile present, yet his gaze cold as steel. Director Liang spoke first, introducing the scholarly significance of this monumental discovery. When the report revealing the counterfeit gold threads was presented, an uproar swept through the crowd. Lu Qinzhou's smile froze on his face as he leaned over to whisper something to his lawyer. Now, allow me to introduce the late Ms. Wan Qingji's work, 100 Birds Paying Homage to the Phoenix. Director Liang gestured for the staff to push forward the display case. This exquisite piece was a collaborative creation by Ms. Ruan's two daughters, Wan Nanji and Wan Beiji, symbolizing the inheritance and innovation of the art of Jing embroidery. The flashbulbs ignited once more as the journalists clamored to capture the moment. Suddenly, Lu Qinzhou rose from his seat. Director Liang, do you not find it rather unbecoming to promote a bloodied embroidery piece? An immediate silence enveloped the room. Mrs. Wan stood up. Her voice calm, yet powerful. The bloodstains are a testament to Qingji's sacrifice in protecting the truth. Mr. Lu, your agitation suggests you fear the world discovering the sordid history of the Lu family's rise to wealth. Lu Qinzhou scoffed. What does an event from 30 years ago have to do with me? If the Lu family continues to deceive consumers with counterfeit materials, that is certainly your concern. Beiji interjected, her voice clear and resolute. I have checked. And the Jean Lu Fong under the Lu Group still sells embroidery materials claimed to be pure gold thread, yet they exceed permissible copper content. Lu Qinzhou's expression shifted dramatically. You speak nonsense. Beiji pulled a document from her bag. This is the testing report for Jean Liu Fong's gold thread, just released yesterday. Would you like me to read it aloud? The atmosphere stirred, with journalists fervently taking notes. Lu Qinzhou's lawyer rushed forward to demand to see the report. Beiji graciously handed it over. By all means. I have prepared 20 copies. Lu Qinzhou fixed a piercing gaze on Beiji, his eyes flickering with a familiar ruthlessness reminiscent of the way he had looked at disobedient socialites in a past life. Miss Beiji, he lowered his voice. Do not forget that I still possess those photographs. A chill gripped my heart, yet Beiji remained unfazed. Mr. Lu, feel free to make them public. In comparison to the societal value of exposing commercial fraud, my personal reputation is of little consequence. Mrs. Wan stepped forward, shielding us. Lu Qinzhou, your father used despicable means to cause Qingji's demise. Now you wish to threaten her daughter? This statement detonated like a bomb in the venue. Lu Qinzhou finally shed his facade, his face contorted in rage as he bellowed. Enough. Hand over that embroidery and the testing report, or else what? Shall you create an accident like your father did? I met his gaze unwaveringly. Lu Qinzhou abruptly gestured, and several men resembling bodyguards stormed in through the side door, rushing toward the display case. Chaos erupted, with journalists shrieking in retreat. Stop them. Director Liang shouted. Beiji and I lunged toward the display case, using our bodies to shield our mother's legacy. A bodyguard seized my arm, and I struggled fiercely. Suddenly, Beiji produced a small spray bottle from her bag, aiming it at the bodyguard's face. Ah! He recoiled, clutching his eyes and staggering back. It was self-defense spray. Back off. Beiji held the spray like a protective lioness, stepping forward. Next is you, Lu Qinzhou. His face turned ashen, clearly unprepared for such staunch resistance. Security personnel rushed in, subduing his bodyguards. The journalists captured the entire scene, flashes illuminating the chaos. Mr. Lu, are you attempting to forcibly seize cultural relics? Does the Lu family acknowledge the adulteration of the gold thread? What is your response regarding the death of Ms. Wan Qingji? Under the relentless onslaught of questions from the media, Lu Qinzhou finally faltered, leaving the venue in disarray. Escorted by his lawyer. As he departed, he cast one last glance at us, a look that sent shivers down my spine. This is not the end, I thought. Once the storm had settled, the press conference continued. Director Liang announced the permanent acquisition of 100 birds facing the phoenix, along with the establishment of a memorial exhibition for Wan Qingji, showcasing her life and works. Beiji and I recounted our mother's story and the journey of our union. Finally, I spoke into the microphone. We wish to take this opportunity to announce the founding of the Qingji Jing Embroidery Academy at Tingwu Biyuan, aimed at cultivating a new generation of inheritors of this art. Beiji added, the academy will be divided into traditional and innovative departments, each overseen by myself and my sister. We hope that this ancient art of Jing embroidery can innovate while being passed down, revitalizing its essence. After the press conference concluded, we returned to the museum's guest house, exhausted. Mrs. Wan had already returned to prepare dinner, leaving Beiji and me to stroll slowly through the night of Suzhou. We had triumphed. Beiji gazed up at the starry sky. Mother can finally rest. I nodded, yet Lu Qinzhou's parting gaze lingered in my mind. He would not relent. Let him come. Beiji unexpectedly smiled. In a past life, I killed my own sister for fame and fortune. In this life, I fear nothing, not even Lu Qinzhou. I wrapped my arm around her shoulder. Suddenly realizing how much stronger she had become since our first meeting, she was no longer the delicate porcelain doll. Art had bestowed upon her strength, while responsibility had granted her courage. Upon returning to Tingwu Biyuan, Mrs. Wan prepared a lavish feast to celebrate. After dinner, she took us to the embroidery room and retrieved an envelope from a hidden compartment. This is a letter from Qingji for you, she said softly. Originally intended for your wedding day, but I believe the time is now. Beiji and I trembled as we opened the envelope. Our mother's handwriting was elegant and strong. To my beloved daughters, if you are reading this letter, it means I have departed from this world. Do not grieve. My love will forever accompany you through the threads and needles. Nanji, your steady nature is suited for inheriting traditional techniques. Beiji, your vivacity allows for bold innovation. Remember, Jing embroidery is like life, marked by sincerity. No matter what happens, remember you are daughters of the Wan family, with the blood of embroiderers flowing in your veins. Golden Phoenix or Silver Phoenix, both are indispensable. Forever loving you, your mother. The letter bore several stains, whether from our mother's tears or our own. We could not tell. Beiji leaned against my shoulder, sobbing, while I clutched the letter as if it could bridge the 30 years that separated me from my mother. The moonlight flowed like water over the lotus pond at Tingwu Biyuan. The early summer lotus flowers had just begun to bloom, exuding a faint, ethereal fragrance in the night. Beiji and I sat side by side in the corridor, watching the moon's reflection in the water. Sister, do you believe in reincarnation? Beiji suddenly asked. I pondered for a moment. I do not know. But if there is, I hope to be your sister again in the next life. Beiji smiled, her profile in the moonlight mirroring that of our mother in her photograph. Then it settled. In our next life, I will be the sister. The night breeze gently caressed us, carrying the scent of lotus. In the distance, the croaking of frogs and the chirping of insects intertwined, forming a symphony of a summer night. On this ordinary evening, in a place where our mother once lived, we sisters finally found genuine solace and peace. No matter how many storms lay ahead, at least in this moment, we had each other, the artistic treasures left by our mother, and the opportunity for a fresh start. Just like 100 birds facing the phoenix, after 30 years of waiting, we finally achieved completion. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and give us a like to show your support. Until we meet again in the next story.